David Rosenberg was in foreclosure. Some say the house is haunted by his ghost, who sits on the veranda lamenting his loss.
Good afternoon. I want to say a very special welcome to the officials of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and the officials of the Housing Development Corporation, to the members of the media and the public. My name is Lakram Bodo. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations, the PAAC, has a mandate to consider and report to the House on the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And thirdly, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 19th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to examine the construction, maintenance, and refurbishment of state-owned or state-funded housing projects and units. The committee is desirous of hearing from the relevant agencies to discover the challenges being faced. The committee hopes that the meeting will be fruitful and provide workable solutions to improve the construction, maintenance, and refurbishment of state-owned or state-funded housing projects and units. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 106.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com@ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. Again, I would want to say a very special welcome to the officials of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation. And if I can ask the officials to introduce themselves, starting with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
Good afternoon, Deputy Chairman and members of the PAAC. My name is Simone Thorne-Mora, and I'm the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. To my right, I will introduce the members of the ministry first. Behind me, to my extreme right, is Mr. Jeffrey Reyes, who is the Program Manager, the Program Monitoring and Coordinating Unit. Next to Mr. Reyes is Ms. Nina Antwine, and she's the Senior Economist, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. To my right, Mr. Hazar Hossein, he's the CEO of the Land Settlement Agency. And to his right is Ms. Lydia Brown, the CEO of the Sugar, Industry, Labor and Welfare Committee. To my left is Mr. Brent Lyons, Managing Director of the Housing Development Corporation, and he will introduce his team.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Brent Lyons, Managing Director of the HDC. To my immediate left is Mr. Romel Ramarak, Divisional Manager, Construction Management and Operations. Next to him is Mr. Preston McQuilkin, Divisional Manager, Project Development and Oversight. On the far left, Mr. Larry McDonald, Divisional Manager, Estate Management. Just to the back of me, Dominic Devonish, Divisional Manager, Finance. Next to Mr. Devonish, we have Mr. Nigel Barrow, Land Use Planner. Next to Mr. Barrow, we have Mr. Jeremy Campbell, Senior Manager, Allocations and Settlement.
Thank you very much. I'll ask the members of the committee to now introduce themselves and I'll start on my far right.
Clarence Rambarat, member.
Daniel Duki, member.
Brigadier General Ansel Antoine, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Good afternoon, Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Afternoon, Jennifer Rafool, member.
Thank you, members. I'm Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman. Again, I say a very special and warm welcome to you, and thank you for being here this afternoon. Perhaps we could start this meeting by inviting you, Madam PS, to make an opening statement.
Again, good day, Mr. Deputy Chairman and members of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. Thank you for permitting us, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and its agencies, to highlight the specific areas of construction, maintenance, and refurbishment of state-owned or state-funded housing projects and units. I do believe that this appearance will give us the opportunity to apprise you and members of the listening and viewing public of some of the activities of the ministry, its achievements, its challenges, and its vision for the future, as well as to obtain recommendations from the members of this august body on how to improve our performance in the coming years. The ministry is mandated to provide affordable housing solutions for eligible citizens, namely those within the low to middle income group, which we have determined to be those persons seeking housing and who earn a combined income of less than $25,000 per month. These solutions are mainly provided through both the Land Settlement Agency and the Housing Development Corporation. The LSA primarily focuses on squatter regularization, while the HDC concentrates on construction under the Accelerated Housing Program. At this juncture, I must mention that at present, the demand for public housing, according to the Ministry's Home Application Fulfillment System, otherwise known as HAFS, the database, it reflects approximately 176,000 applications for houses. As a result of the changing financial vista reflecting low economic growth, the ministry, through the HDC, has been forced to implement strategic measures to become more cost-effective and to further maximize value for money by exploring ways of reducing construction costs. Although the HDC continues to experience challenges in satisfying the demand for housing, it can boast that over the last 3 years, it has had some significant achievements, such as the commencement of housing starts at 7 developments, an allocation of 2,138 houses between 2015 and 2017. However, in order to continue to achieve these successes, the HEC has had to implement measures to both control and reduce the overall cost to both the state and, by extension, the housing applicants. In this regard, the HEC has been effective in reducing the cost of building construction by more than 50% per square foot, and has also launched the Public-Private Partnership Program with a view to satisfying the demands for housing while reducing the strain on the government's resources and encouraging private sector participation. Also, there has been an increase in the flow of revenue to the HDC through concerted efforts to convert license to own and rent to own arrangements to mortgage arrangements between the period 2015 to 2017. This has translated into a total sum of $769 million, a total sum of over $769 million. HDC has also introduced a business strategy whereby beneficiaries are only issued keys on completion of the mortgage process. With respect to maintenance, the HDC has introduced a pilot project whereby a compulsory maintenance fee is paid by all owners, tenants, and licensed to occupy beneficiaries of HDC constructed houses. This is used to defray annual maintenance expenses. Once proven to be successful, it will soon be rolled out to new HDC developments. Refurbishment. As we are all aware, Over the last few years, HEC has had to treat with incidents of vandalism in some of its housing developments. In an effort to mitigate this, the agency has reviewed the manner in which the properties are handled and has implemented systems to minimize this risk. For example, installing digital security systems in unoccupied units while also reinforcing an active security presence on many sites. The HEC has also recommend stalled or incomplete projects to ensure an active HEC presence in some sites which once contained vandalized units. Public-private partnership program. The HEC launched its PPP program in early 2016. To date, contracts for 4 projects, giving a yield of 669 units, using a design, build, finance arrangement on HEC lands, and contracts for 4 projects, giving a yield of 689 units, using a design, build, finance arrangement on private lands. Overall, a combined yield of 1,358 units have been contracted. Naturally, the process is ongoing and several other projects have been evaluated for inclusion into this system. Innovative strategies. While the HEC is actively involved in housing construction, the ministry continues to set the strategic direction which provides the operational framework for its agencies to execute their mandate in accordance with government's vision. However, as the country experiences financial challenges, the ministry has reviewed its core mandate and has decided it must innovate in an effort to support citizens who require additional opportunities for housing. To this end, the ministry has been exploring various supplementary strategies to the Accelerated Housing Program, such as the Housing Incentive Program, the Aided Self-Help Housing Program, the Housing and Village Improvement Program, its Public Education Awareness Campaign, its Home Ownership 101 project, and the provision of technical assistance to homeowners and potential homeowners. Housing Incentive Program. In an effort to mobilize resources from the private sector and to encourage private developers to construct houses to satisfy the current demand for affordable housing, while at the same time stimulating construction in the private sector, the MHUD is currently finalizing the implementation plan and process maps for its HIP. Any developer with a desire and a demonstrated ability to fully finance, build, and sell high-quality housing units in accordance with specific guidelines will be eligible to register and participate in the program and receive tax exemptions for the sale of housing units and cash incentives of up to $100,000 per unit. Aided Self-Help Program. The government's Aided Self-Help Program is a new concept which was launched in 2017 and is aimed at empowering persons to manage the construction of their own homes with financial and technical support from the state. This program will complement the existing Accelerated Housing Program and targets resident citizens without land as well as those with land. The first cycle of the program will allow for the sale of 1,000 lots at 30% of its market value. Housing and Village Improvement Program, HVIP. The ministry will introduce the HVIP as part of an affordable and high-quality housing initiative, which will ultimately preserve the country's existing housing stock, thus reducing the demand for government-subsidized houses. Targeted, disadvantaged rural and peri-urban villages can access housing grants and improved infrastructure. Public Education Awareness Program. This program incorporates traditional and digital media and aims primarily to empower citizens so that they can make informed housing-related decisions. The campaign is twofold. The public awareness component is expected to focus on the creation of a positive brand identity for the ministry by clarifying its roles and responsibilities in relation to its agencies, while the education component is intended to provide as much information as possible to the citizenry so they can be guided appropriately in the conduct of all affairs related to housing. H101, Home Ownership 101 or Housing Manual, a complete guide from home purchase to maintenance and everything in between. The ministry will introduce a publication manual geared towards educating citizens from the range of all options towards home ownership to the responsibilities one should have to being a proud homeowner. Through policy initiatives, it is evident that government is determined to make affordable, high-quality housing for all citizens. A driving force that brings a citizen even closer to their dreams of home ownership is knowing all the options available to them. The manual, which is also expected to be available in digital format, also serves a dual role, not only a pre-ownership guide, but covers post-ownership. And finally, streamlining of the ministry. The ministry is cognizant of the need to become more flexible and responsive to the changing environment, and to this end, a cabinet note on the restructuring of the ministry has been prepared. One of the key changes will be the revision of the mandate of the unit, which is currently charged with the responsibility for the administration of its home improvement grants. This unit will, if Cabinet agrees, also provide technical assistance related to construction techniques and solutions, advice on the types of repairs and improvement that may be required by homeowners, and assistance in the costing of materials and advice on the adequacy of the relevant construction materials. This level of assistance will empower citizens to make more informed choices as it pertains to housing construction and maintenance. As I conclude, I wish to reassure this committee that we at the ministry and its agencies are dedicated towards becoming flexible and responsive to the changing socioeconomic environment while transitioning to a more customer-centric operating model. Thank you again for the opportunity to convey the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development strategic intent, its objectives, its challenges, and its successes. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam PS, for that comprehensive opening statement. Housing is a very basic need, and sometimes some will regard it as a right, and is a very highly emotional issue, and I'm sure that the public will be looking on at this hearing very keenly. What I would want you to tell us, Madam PS, before we go into the details of some of the submissions that you would have produced for us. You spoke about the ministry's vision and so on, but from the opening statement, you mentioned that there are 176,000 housing applications on the files right now, but that just over 2,000 houses were delivered in the period 2015 to 2017. So immediately one can see that in terms of citizens' expectations, there is a big gap in terms of the demand as opposed to the supply. How do you view that? In other words, what is the ministry's vision and perhaps a mandate in terms of trying to bridge that gap?
The ministry and its agencies, we would love to be able to satisfy this demand. But the reality is there's a financial challenge. We just do not have the money. And that is the reason the government itself just doesn't have the money. And that is why we have been changing our direction where, in an effort to remove some of the strain from the government, you would have heard me speak about changing our mandate in empowering citizens to take control of their lives, because there are a lot of persons out there who have land, or they already live in somewhere and they own their house. Okay, it may not be their house, but it's their family house. And the house is probably currently very small or not in the best of, it needs repairs. So while we would give things like grants and subsidies, okay, so let me use an example. So someone is living, let's say, in this family house, and it's a young man, and he's getting married. He can come to the ministry. So they're living in the family house, and the way the house is, they can put a second story, or they could put a side apartment, or if it's a mother wants to come and live, you could put your granny suite. So you could come to the ministry. We would give you advice. We will do the plan is, as I said, once we restructure, to go to we'll do site visits, advise, what you could, the best thing for you to do here based on the size of the land, the terrain of land. You could do a split level, you could put in an apartment here, you could do a duplex. Of course, we will guide you to go by Town and Country Planning Division to get proper, to ensure that it's allowed, it's legal. All right, so that's the kind of thing, though. Because there's that gap, we've recognized that, and we know we will, and right now, maybe in the coming years, things may be different. We will not be able to, we have to be real, we have to be realistic. But we're not going to just leave you out there and say, we can't help you. We will help you. And that is why the vision now of the ministry, apart from the beginning, the PPP model, that's why we are looking at things like the home ownership manual so people can come. Because there are a lot of single mothers out there, for example. I always say about it. I use myself as an example. When I had to do my repairs, I am sure that the contractor ripped me off. And that's how the idea came into being. One of the engineers at the ministry, one of the housing development inspectors in the ministry, he said, P.S., why didn't come to me? I would have spoken to, I would have helped you. And that's how one of the ideas kind of germinated. We can help people out there. We're going to hold your hand. You could come to us. We would, we will come out, do a site visit. We will give you tell you, look, you could put up a duplex here. You could put up an apartment here to house, the extra, the children or whatever.
Thank you, P.S. I get the idea. Yeah. If I could just further ask, in terms of all of these initiatives, in terms of narrowing the gap, and perhaps I could draw Mr. Lyons into the discussion at this point, perhaps in terms of the projection for the number of houses you expect to deliver in 2018. I'm just trying in the public's mind, because there's a big gap. You're talking about 176,000 applications, and yet we are saying that only 2,000 houses were delivered in the 2-year period.
Chairman and members, a couple of things that we've been doing. Essentially, we are trying to get private sector participation because, as the PS mentioned, funding is limited and so on. So the more private sector participation we get, or encouraging and empowering individuals to, I suppose, take charge of their own situation and participate in the home construction incentive program, for instance. Those are a couple of initiatives we think that will assist the whole housing drive. In terms of delivery, we are projecting between 2,000 to 2,500 houses again for this year. That's straight on from the HDC side. With respect to PPPs and housing construction incentive program, if we can add a further 2,000 to 3,000 houses would be great, and that's what we are trying to project actually.
So you're looking at about 2,000 plus another 3,000, maybe around 5,000.
If we could get up to 5,000.
Yeah. If I can just further ask, with regards to this database of 176,000 housing applications, do you believe this is a true reflection of the housing needs of those people whom you are targeting? I'm asking that in light of whether this database is reviewed, updated, the quality of it, whether it's interactive or fairly regularly updated database and so on. What are your thoughts on that? Or is it higher figure or lower figure?
It is current. Even if we assume that a significant portion of that maybe persons who probably, one, can't afford, or two, have already gotten houses and so on. And just very speculative, and you say that figure is 100,000. 100,000 is still a significant number of people. All right? So the demand is real. The challenge is for us to be able to bridge that gap.
Thank you. This might just be a moot question, but in terms of the land that is available to supply this demand, you will probably agree that there is sufficient land in Trinidad and Tobago to supply that. And if the answer is yes, could you share with us challenges that you might face in terms of acquiring the land for housing?
Let's just put in context the demand, the database, and where persons have indicated that they like to live. More than 50% of the database have said, I'd like to live on the east-west corridor. Put that in context, you're talking over 80,000 people, or 80,000 applicants. there's limited land along the east-west corridor, as we all know. If the further east you go, okay, possibly there's some land there, but anything heading west is very limited. So what we've been trying to do is, one, locate any available land that we can, that the state owns, and maximize the use of that, as well as two, again, encourage private sector participation. If you have the land, come. All right, this is what these PPP arrangements are for.
Thank you. So can I then ask you, in terms, you may not be able to say offhand, but in terms of saying specifically, what lands are available through the Office of the Commissioner of State Lands, is that something that you can provide to the committee, that the lands that are currently available?
No, I don't have that information in terms of what's available. What I can say, when based on the demands that we see on the database, what we do in terms of trying to source available land, we do approach the Commissioner of State Lands to see what is possible, what is available for us, and so on. But in terms of the total amount, I can't say.
Is that something that could be provided in writing, perhaps, to the committee?
I'm sure we can.
Yes. Thank you. Before I open up the floor to the other members of the committee, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the issue of the compulsory acquisition of land. And has the HEC identified any lands that is to be acquired by compulsory acquisition?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify one thing as well with regards to the acquisition of private lands. I noted in the submission that the process involves two valuations. So in the process of acquiring the private lands, how is the valuation supplied by the Commissioner of Valuation and the one from the Commission of Independent Valuation reconciled? Because I noticed in the process there are two valuations that come in. How is that done?
Okay. When you receive the valuation from the Commission of Valuation, you simply also get the one from the private valuator, and you take a look at the both, and you would hope that they are similar or close enough.
What is the reality of the situation?
There are times when there are differences.
And how does one reconcile that? How does one make a decision?
You can always go to a second or third independent valuator.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The purpose of this inquiry is to deal with issues of construction, maintenance, and refurbishment. So I just, in fairness to your team, Mr. Leons, I just wanted to find out first, could you tell me how long the three officers have been employed with HEC? Your divisional manager.
But I'll ask them to see for themselves.
Good day. Since September 2013.
Mr. McQuilkin.
Good afternoon. 7 months.
And Mr. McDonald.
Good afternoon, member. Since July 2012, so just a bit over 5 years.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. I just want to make sure that we might be able to get the answers. Now, when we talk about construction, maintenance, and refurbishment, I think at the heart of what we want to discuss this afternoon is the issues to me of price, contracts, and variations. And a good starting point for me is Eden Gardens. When you look at Eden Gardens, there are things in the public domain about the acquisition of the site. But we know that the price paid for Eden Gardens is $175 million. We also know, based on information that was provided to the committee, that the 300 units scheduled for Eden Gardens would cost $272 million. In fact, so that is, Eden Gardens is broken up into 3 packages. Package 1 is for site preparation. That contract, as you know, that work is way behind schedule. Package number 2 is for the construction of houses. Package number 3 is for the construction of houses. When you go to, so the valuation, the acquisition of the site, and other members will get into that issue. The acquisition of the site is a matter of public concern, $175 million. The first package, the information that is before me is that there are problems with the contractor's delivery of that package because of problems in the scoping of the works. The contract, the original contract, did not have a proper scope of works. So what started off as a $39 million contract to be performed over 2 months, I could be wrong, we already have the contractor submitting a variation for $17 million, and HDC is prepared to pay $10 million. So on the site preparation, I'm taking you through the sequence and the way the public suffers. Acquisition of land was a problem. Developing the land appears to me to be a problem because your information, HEC's information, is that this contract was not properly scoped, and we have a variation already. And then we get into the construction part of it. And we don't know if those 2 construction projects will land within the contracted price. What that adds up to, if we go to the current way in which things are unfolding, each unit at Eden Gardens will cost the taxpayers $1.5 million, each unit, a minimum. And those units are, in the normal course of things, should maybe sold between $600,000 to $750,000. Let us say $600,000. It means that the taxpayers of this country, using Eden Gardens as the example, would have provided a subsidy of close to $1 million. So, and I know at least 2 persons here would have been involved in some way in Eden Gardens. And maybe you could open the discussion on maintenance, construction, and refurbishment by telling us how contracts could be improperly scoped, how variations could arise on almost every project, and how these units end up costing taxpayers so much money and the subsidy is so significant.
Members, just to say, there's some aspects of Eden Gardens that are before the court, so I'd be limited in terms of some of the comments I may make on it. With respect to some of the numbers that you mentioned, it is very possible that, yes, there'll be a significant subsidy and so on. And there might have been some issues in the past with that. I would want to focus on what the current management at the agency is doing and how we are treating with issues of those to ensure that the country at the end of the day gets value for money. And if to put in some context, I think I'm almost tempted to say when this management assumed office, we did a review and study of the costs of construction and so on, because we wanted to get a proper understanding of what we're dealing with and how exactly what you say, how the contracts are set up and managed. And what we were able to deduce is that the cost of construction was within a range of about $560 per square foot to $1,080 per square foot. And what we did some value engineering with respect to existing projects and so on, and how we wanted to go forward with the types of designs of units that we've done and so on. And we can say quite confidently that we've been able to reduce the cost of construction down from $560 on the low end to about $440 per square foot, and down from $1,080 on the high end to $650 a square foot. So we think we are now within a realistic range. We think now that we can achieve, the public can achieve value for money. We think that we are building at a realistic price range. There's some things that we've done with respect to the designs and so on to get us to where we are right now. But the long and short of it is that we think we've been able to get the cost of construction down. With respect to the contract development, scoping and project management and so on, we now have a well-established project development and oversight unit headed by Mr. McQuilkin. And the role and purpose of that group really is to do exactly that. First determine whether or not a project is feasible. Assuming it is, to develop all the specifications around it and to have it properly scoped. When it is properly scoped, we have a well-established procurement process whereby we go through a rigid tendering process to select a contractor. Having selected someone, the project is then passed over to Mr. Ramarak as the construction management group. And they are now charged with the responsibility to ensure that the project comes in on time and on budget and so on. As a matter of fact, what they have introduced, and we would have mentioned this before, it's a 22-point quality certification program. So at every step of the construction process, you have to have your work signed off as having met some standards. So for instance, the setting out of the house to start with on the land, when that is done, you actually have to get a certificate from Mr. Ramarak's group saying you can move on to doing excavation to start your foundation. So those are some of the things that we've put in place to ensure that you get value for money, that the projects are coming on time and on budget and so on, and meet the specifications as scoped.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I am to sum up some of the comments made by the PS and the Managing Director, I would say that you have told us that in your mandate to provide affordable housing for low and middle income earners, that you are in the process of maybe re-engineering the way you go about delivering your services to the public, and you would have identified a number of initiatives, some may be new, that you are using and implementing to provide this service, such as the PPP, the Aided Self-Help Program, your Village Improvement Program. So I just want to focus on one a little bit. In terms of your PPP, I think Madam P has mentioned that it is expected to provide 1,358 units. Is that correct? Over what period of time we are talking about?
Member?
Yeah.
The 1,358 units are contracted currently, and we expect construction to start within the next three months to 6 months, and there's a construction time of, I would say, between 2 to 3 years. Those are a total of 8 projects.
All right. And in terms of your vision for this program, in terms of meeting the housing demand, and of course we know what the demand is like, what is the vision for this program going forward to increase this 1,358 to a figure that we will be happy with in terms of making a dent in supply?
Remember, there are several other PPP projects that we have under review in various stages of development and so on, for approximately 7,500 units. We expect that we will have those wrapped up in terms of the project development work being completed and being able to go to procurement and so on, probably by the end of this year or so. It'll take a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you. Before I invite Member Webster Roy. I just want to follow up on PS, and this is to you specifically. In a previous submission, previous inquiry in this committee, it was noted that there was no monitoring and evaluation unit at the ministry. Can you indicate whether the ministry has made any progress in terms of establishing a monitoring and evaluation unit?
Thank you, Deputy Chair. The ministry is not, there is not a monitoring and evaluation unit per se, and there's a reason for that. When I assumed duty as PS, and I looked at the job description of the approved job description of the monitoring and evaluation officers, that this was something that was approved years ago. I observed that the qualifications were things like a degree in sociology, a degree in management, a degree in economics. And I discussed it with the officers. We didn't think that that sort of qualification was suitable for a ministry such as the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, because a large part of our core mandate is the construction of, it's a construction sector, construction of houses. And in our opinion, when you're talking about monitoring and value, and value for money and safety, persons with a degree in management or sociology would not be able to adequately do the job. We felt we needed people with engineering skills, quantity surveying skills, those kind of skills you would find in a construction sector. So it was based on that analysis that we felt what we really needed was a project unit that would be staffed with project officers and who would have engineering skills, those skills that I referred to, the project management, the engineering, quantity surveying type of skills. So we've been having discussion with the Ministry of Public Administration to have that type of unit set up to get, to get that the permission. I was told, well, because of again the financial constraints, we are at that stage of negotiating to see what best we could, what is the best fit with limited resources, because we had a complete org structure for this unit with a project officer which is responsible for monitoring for each agency. The PMCD from Ministry of Public Administration, they are reviewing our proposal and they are to get back to us.
So you're saying the concept is the same, you're calling it by a different name, essentially, but what is your constraint?
No, but the skills, it's not so much the name, but the skills.
Sure, I understand that.
Yeah.
But what is your constraint now? How long has these negotiations been taking place?
About over 6 months.
All right.
Yeah. But I do have, we do have on short term. I did hire one officer on short term contract to assist, and he does what as best as he can. He would make site visits to the Land Settlement Agency, but he's one person. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Webster Roy.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Lyons, you noted that in order to address the housing shortage, we're looking towards the implementation of the PP arrangements. I wanted to understand if the PP was being managed through that same unit that is set up, headed by Mr. McClurkin, and how is it administered?
Yes, it is. And really, that really is just a procurement and financing model. The project development work is pretty much the same. It just means you will go out or you are inviting private sector participation, but the project development work is really the same. And it is managed by Mr. McGuilkin and his group.
So that unit will oversee from the call for proposals, everything?
Yes, they take it up to the point of contract award, and then it's handed over to the construction and management group.
Thank you. Member Mark.
Yes, may I also welcome the team from both the AGC and the Ministry of Housing. Madam Permanent Secretary, you have said that you are in the process, that is, the ministry is in the process of revising its mandate, and therefore you are streamlining operations consistent with that particular objective. You would agree with me that the whole question of financial accountability is critical because you spend monies that are allocated to you. You collect money as well, and you engage in borrowing as well. Could you explain to this committee why the Ministry of Housing and maybe Mr. Brent, HDC, have not submitted to the Parliament financial audited statements for the last 17 years? My data and research points me to 2000 to 2017. That's the first question. And the second question I want to ask, why are you in violation of the Constitution of this Republic by your failure to submit administrative reports annually to His Excellency, as the Constitution of the Republic mandates you so to do? And what is being done with some degree of urgency to address both? Those are my initial questions. I have some follow-up, but I'd like to get some responses to those too, because we can talk about all kinds of things. At the end of the day, we need financial accountability. And we get financial accountability through these submissions.
Thank you, Member Mark. I will speak to the administrative reports, and Mr. Lyons will speak to the financial reports from HGC. We have, the ministry has submitted up to 2014, 2015, according to my records, the administrative reports. We are currently finalizing 2015 and 2016, 2015 and 2016, and 2016 and 2017, and that should be submitted shortly. Well, it has to go to Cabinet, and once it goes to Cabinet. But as far as I'm aware, it's just those 2 years that we have not submitted.
So you have copies of all those reports between 2000, because I think that came into effect in 1999, that constitutional amendment. So between 1999 2000, when it took effect, could you advise us when those reports were submitted? Is it from 2001 that you would have submitted to 2014, or have you done that?
I will have to do the research, but I distinctly remember the last one that came to my office, my desk, the final commit was 2014, 2015, and I know that was submitted.
It was submitted
that was
to who?
submitted to Parliament a few months ago.
No, it doesn't. You know, you have to send it to His Excellency, and then His Excellency would then submit it to the Parliament.
No, but it was submitted to His Excellency. It would have been.
Would you be kind enough to submit to the Secretary of this committee all those administrative reports that you have said have been submitted to His Excellency, and if you can send those reports to the Parliament, because you would have sent them to him, but our records are showing that we have none.
Okay. Because I know we are currently preparing 2015, 2016, we're finalizing it. And we started to, and we also started 2016 to 2017.
So all previous reports would have been submitted. So we'd like you to submit those to us.
I will, member.
Yeah,
sure.
and can we hear from Mr. Brent now about our financial audited statements?
Yes, member. As previously stated,
Mr. Brent Lyons.
That's fine, member. As previously mentioned to this committee when we were here last, the outstanding statements are from 2005, since the inception of the HTC. And what we stated then, and we continue to work on it now, is that the agency has been in the process of rebuilding accounts from since then and having them reviewed by the external auditors and so on. We are now currently up to 2009, and we continue to be on target. At the last time we were here, we did say that our target for getting current would be December 2019, and we are currently on target for that to happen.
Yes, but you haven't answered my question. If you have completed 2009, this Parliament is yet to see 2006, 2007, 2008. Where are those financial audited accounts that have been completed by your HTC?
Madam Chair, good afternoon. If I could interject. What the MD is referring to is the draft financial statements are complete up until 2017. Right now, our auditors, KPMG, they finished the field work on 5, 6, 7, 8, and they're finishing up 9. We're expecting it this month. So we should get final audit opinions sometime in February or March. That's where we are with those right now.
Mr. Brent Lyons, when would we be able to get 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9? Would you be able to give this committee some clear undertaking as to when those reports will be formally submitted to the minister and then through the minister to this Parliament?
Okay. My mom advised that by March this year, we should be able to provide those signed off final accounts.
To the Parliament?
To the Parliament.
Yeah. That's before I have an area I'd like to clear up with the Permanent Secretary and maybe your good self. This program you call Rural Housing and Village Improvement Program. Could you tell us, I understand the phases that you have identified in your submission, and that there's an allocation of $5 million towards the completion of that program. Could you tell us what is the formula that is being used for village selection as it relates to this particular rural housing and village improvement program? And has the ministry considered other villages for this particular project? And if so, could you identify those villages?
Thank you, Member Moore. The first thing, the project, although the line item on the books, as we call it, says Rural Housing and Village Improvement Program, it has been renamed the Housing and Village Improvement Program. The project was conceptualized because one of our agencies, the Land Settlement Agency, has been constantly doing social surveys of selected sites, over 300 sites. My colleague, Mr. Hussain, will be able to give a little more detail on those sites, as well as they've been using CSO data. And from these surveys, they have identified that there are many villages. And the reason we removed rural is because some of the villages are urban, peri-urban. some of the villages were characterized by high degrees of poverty, unemployment, poor infrastructure. The housing, the state of the houses, was very dilapidated, and generally poor housing conditions. So that is one of the reasons why the project itself was conceptualized. Now, based on the surveys, we would have. Let me give you the exact the criteria. Okay. So I said the criteria. I think I mentioned that already. The criteria for the selection. Okay. So the level of unemployment, the state of the infrastructure, per capita income, number of persons, below the poverty line, right? So that's the kind of criteria that was used. We are now in the village selection stage of the project. Okay. The area that has been earmarked is the Samuel Cooper Fifth Company Village in Moruga, and I will explain why that village was one of the villages that was selected. After Hurricane Brett, when the ministry gives out emergency grants, emergency shelter grants, which is given out to persons whose houses have been damaged because of some natural disaster. Well, not once a natural disaster, because it applies to fire victims, but some disasters, so fire, landslide, flooding. We got the majority of the applications we got. The applications were open to everyone who was affected by flooding. It wasn't limited to any area. But we received the majority of the applications came from Moruga. When we visited the area to ascertain that the applicants were in need, the ministry would have observed the real dire situation that existed in that area, together with the fact that it would have also been one of the areas that the Land Settlement Agency would have done one of their social surveys. So that is one of the reasons why a decision was taken to start with Moruga. But also, apart from that, not a major, I wouldn't say it was a major factor in determining, because the major factor, I said, would have been the conditions that existed. But a minor factor in determining, in selecting Sam Cooper Village is because of that area holds a historical significance. It is the location where you have the descendants of the Americans, and the Americans were those African-American soldiers, okay, who would have fought for Britain, and in the 1812 war, and after Britain lost the war, of course they couldn't stay in America, so they had to find somewhere to put them, and several groups were sent to Trinidad. So that was a minor factor, but it's still a factor, because there's also that, that you're trying to preserve your historical, cultural characteristics, So putting all of those reasons, all of those factors together, that village was selected as one of the first villages. But we are in the process of, we're still looking at other, because we have the results of the social survey, and we are still assessing, Now, I think in my submission, may have said that is only one location. Well, you said one location has been earmarked to date. but it is not exhaustive.
Would you be kind enough to submit to this committee copies of your survey as well as the outline of the criteria that you have given in writing? And could the individual that you mentioned indicate to this committee, after this particular location, are there any other locations that have been identified for similar treatment in fiscal 2018? Could you tell us, or is that the only community that has been identified for the 2018 program?
To date, right now, it's only that, but I would not say that it's the only one. We are still in the stage of looking at the options. It is, we are
Is there a
finalized.
particular amount of monies or budget that has been allocated for this particular program? Because we know that you have $5 million to utilize in this particular project. Is there a particular amount of monies that have been allocated for it?
Right now, it's $5 million, but depending on the success, then there's midterm review. We will go back at midterm review for more money.
And finally, could Mr. Hussein provide this committee with a list of the 300 villages or 300 areas that you all have identified that would be in need of support? And this program is the ideal tool to really use in helping those particular areas that you would have identified.
Chairman and members, and good afternoon. PS mentioned that we have looked at a number of areas, and the areas that we have looked at for this particular program is based on CSO data and social survey information that the LSA has. We have conducted social surveys in over 300 sites in Trinidad, and we have that data. Apart from the Samuel Cooper area that PS mentioned, we have looked at other areas, and you asked the question whether there are other areas. We've looked at Sea-Trace, Bagatelle, Lance Mita, Samuel Cooper is one of them, Blanchishares, Matlot, Gonzales, Port of Spain. Those are just some of the areas we have started preliminary works and looking at the data that we have, looking at the income levels to make a determination what sort of intervention is required.
Just a follow-up. In terms of doing this survey, do you actually interview the residents of the villages and so on? How do you actually conduct the survey?
Yeah, Chairman, it's a comprehensive survey that that is conducted. There's a questionnaire which covers all social data, income data, economic data. We look at the quality of housing that exists, the quality of the infrastructure. All of that is covered.
And can you indicate whether it will be an ongoing project, or you think you've exhausted?
It will be ongoing. Social surveys, it's an ongoing thing that we do, looking at the quality of life in general. There's a close correlation between squatter regularization and some of these sites, and hence we are constantly looking at these projects and areas.
Are members of Parliament, elected MPs, are they involved in this exercise? Because they would have an appreciation in their respective constituencies, depressed areas, underdeveloped area, and that sort of thing. So are members of Parliament elected by the people, are they directly involved in this exercise, or are they left out completely?
And councillors as well, local government councillors.
Chairman, members, what we have done so far is to look at the data that we have in-house, looking at the CSO data, looking at the data that the LSA has to make a determination. We have not gone out to members of Parliament as at this point.
That's all right. I'm just trying to, that's what I'm trying to understand, the process. So, for example, if you are going into a particular area, will you notify, for example, the sitting member of Parliament or the councillor? Is that normal, or that hasn't been done?
Well, that hasn't been done as yet, but certainly we will take your advice.
Thank you. Member Antoine.
Good evening again. In your response, the ministry and AGC indicated that AGC has systems in place to deal with the maintenance of the housing development and units. I'm looking into the area of sewer wastewater treatment plants. Your contractors in some of your development build wastewater plants, treatment plants, and at the end of the project, it's handed over to AGC. I can speak for my constituency, Dawadioumira. We have some aging sewer plants that are problematic at this point in time. We even have a plant that is under threat in Signature Gardens from the Mausika River. In addition, in some of your high-rise apartments, we know for a fact that residents complain about problems in terms of sewer and wastewater. I want to know what is AGC's policy in terms of these treatment plants. What is your relationship with WASA? Have some of these plants been handed over to WASA? Some of them still being maintained by AGC? What is the situation in terms of the entire wastewater sewer treatment plant, both in terms of your housing development, the old ones, those new that ones are coming on stream, because I'm told that in River Run Through, a housing scheme that's been built in the Arima area, there's no sewer plant for being built for that particular housing scheme. So I wonder what is the policy of AGC and WASA in terms of wastewater treatment in terms of housing development?
Yes, Chairman and members. The agency has been working closely with WASA over the past year in an attempt to have WASA actually take over all the plants. In the interim, and what has been happening, agency has been paying to have those plants maintained. It is a challenge, yes, and some of the plants are old, and the infrastructure and machinery, the pumps and so on, are aging. We change out as much as we can and do as much maintenance as we can. But the plan really is to have WASA take over all those plants eventually, and we are in the process. And they have taken over some, and there's several more that are earmarked to be taken over. As it relates specifically to River Runs Through, there are two scenarios happening there. Approval has been granted for on-lot disposal for some of the units, and we are in fact going to be putting in a treatment plant at River Runs Through for the other units.
Could you give a time frame in terms of this MOU or this handover between yourself and WASA in terms of the treatment plants?
We are anticipating that will happen this year, within 2018. There's a lot of work to be done. I have to acknowledge that it's not a simple process such as simply handing it over. There's a lot of work to be done. WASA's asked that the plans be upgraded to a certain level first before they could take over entirely, which is a very costly exercise, but we're working towards doing it. And we anticipate that most, if not all, will be done this year.
So you are giving us an undertaking that it would be completed by?
Well, I am not in this alone. There's WASA too, so I don't want to say here that it will be done definitely this year. We are targeting to have it done this year.
Thank you. If I may just follow up. Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to everyone who is present and answering questions. I wanted to ask a few questions. Mr. Ramarak, you had said that since the economic declines, the HDC has been looking at cost savings mechanisms and has been able to successfully reduce the cost per square foot from approximately $600 to $1,000 per square foot to between $450 to $600 per square foot, and that some of the developments behind that were structural changes and design changes. Can you elaborate a bit upon how the agency has been able to reduce the cost per square foot so drastically?
All right, good day, everyone. Just one instance, or one particular project, a single family unit was actually costing $660,000 we got it down to $540,000 by doing some design efficiencies. So these design efficiencies would have been relooking the design for the foundation. In that particular instance, the design for that foundation was a strip footing. Looking at the soils data, we realized that it could have been completed as a raft foundation, which is less concrete, less steel, and a less volume on the whole. The next efficiency was in terms of the roof members, the steel members. It was a design-build contract, so we asked the design contractor to review the steel members in terms of the span, in terms of the depth and dimensions of the beams itself. They got it to be reduced and still be functional structurally. We also looked at the electrical layout in the particular unit. The electrical layout, for instance, in the master bedroom had outlets on every wall, which we realized was a bit of an overkill. So we reduced that as well throughout the entire unit. We have certain instances where the entire unit was tiled, so we restricted that to the wet areas only. Other instances would be the bathroom area itself will have full vanity setup, so we reduced that to just what is necessary to get the completion certificate. In terms of the walls, the structural element of the walls, in that particular instance, we had the walls fully loaded and steel members in every core. A redesign was also done in terms of design efficiency, and realized that the steel could have been in one core unloaded. So that also reduced in terms of the concrete and steel. And also in the kitchen areas, we have lower and upper kitchen cabinetry. So we just reduce it to the lower, which is necessary with the kitchen sink. And that is some of the elements that, or most of the elements we would have considered in reducing the cost and still getting it to be functional.
Thank you. Do you think that you can get the cost down even further?
I think it could be done, but it would be a collaborative effort. It would be reaching out to different stakeholders. For instance, recently we had conversations with the National Quarry, which is another state enterprise. If we could forge stronger bonds with these other state enterprises, probably the private sector as well, in terms of hardwares and suppliers, we could probably set something up in terms of HDC contractors possibly could get a discount on materials, quality materials with a certification, and also could also have a reduction in terms of the raw cost of materials.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm curious to learn more about the public-private partnership initiative that's happening. Has that already started? There were two that were referred to in the documents and the opening remarks. There's the one that's happening with HDC and private sector contractors and private sector financiers specifically. And then there's also the IDB subsidy program. Can you discuss both of them? You said the private sector contracting one started in 2016. The IDB one, I didn't see much elaboration on in the documents.
Okay, so the, thank you, member. The IDB, under the IDB Neighborhood Upgrading Program, subsidies were given for the construction of houses as well as the repair of houses. So subsidies of 50, one second, let me just get my notes. Right. Subsidies of up to $30,000, sorry, $50,000 were given for the construction of houses not valued at more than $200,000. That's in Trinidad. And in Tobago, houses were valued a little higher, $250,000, because the cost of construction is high in Tobago. For the period Okay, so the home construction, so 1,223 housing construction subsidies were given out under this program. Okay, and of that figure, 183 were given out to persons in Tobago. Started in the loan was signed in 2011. Mm-hmm. But the majority of subsidies were given 2016, 2017. Mm-hmm. But with your permission, with the chair's permission, if I could invite Mr. Dr. Reyes, am I right, who is the program coordinator, to give some, he'll have the intimate details of the program.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman, members, good afternoon. The loan is a $40 million loan that was taken from the Inter-American Development Bank. The government of Trinidad and Tobago provided a counterpart fine of $10 million. Subsidies are up to a maximum of $50,000. If your salary is is between $48,000 per year and $35,000 if your salary is above 48 and under 54. The home improvement subsidy is $20,000 for anyone once your salary is under $84,000 per year. We have been able, over the period of the loan, to actually disburse 424 of these subsidies to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. In Tobago, we disbursed over the period 185 of these subsidies.
Is there a project document of evaluating the effectiveness of the program, and is that public information?
Well, the Inter-American Development Bank is now in the process of conducting the final evaluation. We have hired a consultant, and that should be completed by the end of March, when the loan is totally closed off. And that would be public information when that is completed.
I have a few more questions. Regarding the two different Excel spreadsheets that were submitted to us, one was submitted by the ministry, the other one was submitted by HDC, and they were regarding the ongoing projects and the number of housing units, namely the contractor, and overall costs. I noticed that there were some discrepancies between the two documents. Some had the document that's from the Ministry of Housing has the initial estimated cost of the contracts as well as the current estimated costs. So it includes potential variations. The one that's from the HDC only has the contract value and it doesn't have the variation in that. I also noticed that the total number of houses that are in the pipeline is different on the two documents. One lists 5,585 and the other one lists 6,412. And I'm curious as to why there are discrepancies between the two documents.
Remember, we would go with the HDC's document. It's possible the one we submitted, we would have gotten it from agency, but we would have gotten it like a week or two before, so it's possible that more updated figures. So we would go with the HDC's document as the true and correct one.
Okay, so then it's just an issue of timing.
Yeah.
Okay, so one might be more current.
Yeah, we would go with the HDC's document.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a few more, but I'll...
Thank you. I just wanted to take us back to the issue of the designs and the reduction in costs and so on, and just to indicate whether you can give the public the assurance that these cost-cutting measures, because this is what you're saying, would in no way impact in terms of the structure, the structural safety of the homes. And furthermore, the second question would be whether HDC homes are constructed to meet the standards in terms of hurricane and earthquakes and so on. What sort of international standards the homes would meet?
Vice Chair, let me ask Mr. Ramarak to treat with the first question and Mr. McQuilkin to treat with the second question.
Again, concerning the first question, in terms of the design efficiency, yes, it is done according to the building codes, and these reductions is not really a reduction in terms of the design being inefficient or the design not working. It is still within the optimal use of a design that would be able to allow the building to function structurally in accordance to the codes. What is determining this is actually soils data. When the foundation was reduced, the design itself, the soils data determined that it could have been reduced from strip footing to raft foundation using less concrete and less steel. Design calculations were done, and the engineers responsible for it actually stamped off on those drawings as well. It is a design build contract, so the contractors actually did designs and we reviewed it in-house.
Chairman, members, I wish to state that all designs are done in accordance with the current codes, and the designs are vetted by the Town and Country Planning. They ensure that we go through places like WASA, T&Tech, Drainage, Designs Branch, and all of these designs are certified and stamped off. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mark.
Yes, but I don't think you have adequately answered that question. I think what members are interested in knowing is that what are the acceptable standards as it relates to building codes for the construction of HGC homes that would recognize that we are in an earthquake zone, and that because of climate change, we have very powerful hurricanes visiting our shores and our lands. We would like to know, when you build homes, HGC, on the seismic scale, what kind of earthquake can these homes withstand in terms of international standards that you have accepted? That is what we're trying to find out. If we are designing our homes to withstand, reasonably big earthquakes, so that people's home can have limited destruction at the end of the day. A 7.5 as an example, or 6.5.
Well, I could say yes, that it is designed to suit the biggest, the largest that will be zoned for the location, and those guidelines are policed by the designs branch. So we go to them and we ensure that we meet what they tell us to meet. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a follow-up question, and you could put it in writing, and this is the Permanent Secretary and Mr. Hussain. I've already asked for a copy to be made available to this committee of the comprehensive social survey. That's the first thing. Could you tell us what are the expected dates for the commencement of Phase 4 and Phase 5 of this particular program that we have discussed? And also the tendering process. Has the tendering process commenced for this particular, or those phases for the houses and so on to even start? And if it has a contractor been selected? I don't know if you have any responses to those, or you want to put all in writing.
I think I'll put that in writing because I need to do some research. However, could you clarify the last part of the question where you talk about a contractor?
No, I'm saying that, you remember, you're going to be building houses from what I'm seeing here.
This is the Housing and Village Improvement Program you're speaking about.
Yes. One of the components is not, you're not going to deal with housing?
Yes, but the ministry will not be, we won't be selecting the contractors. The homeowner or the homeowners will be selecting their own contractors. Oh. We will be giving them the subsidy.
Yes, the subsidy, okay.
Yes.
All right, I'm guided.
Yeah.
All right. May I also go to a very critical matter? And that has to do with the selection of contractors. Mr. Lyons, is there a procurement policy at the level of the HGC that would guide the HGC when it comes to the issue of identifying contractors for projects of the HGC? And if there is, could you make a copy of that available to this committee?
Remember, there is such a document. We have the tender rules, and a copy can be made available to this committee.
Could you also tell us, in terms of contractors, could you tell us what is the total amount owed to contractors of the HGC at this current time?
Member, let me invite Mr. Devonish to provide that information.
Member, as of the end of December 2017, the HGC has debts of $814 million owed to contractors.
Have these, are there any matters before the courts? How many are there? And what are the values involved?
Member asks that I provide that to you in writing.
Could you indicate whether the $814 million have been properly audited, verified, and therefore there can be no query or question about their authenticity?
Remember, there can always be questions, but the $814 million are certified invoices.
Certified invoices, okay. Could you also share with us whether you are aware of any auditing of the HGC operations in the last 2 years? And if there is, could you identify the firm that was involved and further the costs of this auditing exercise?
Remember, PricewaterhouseCoopers was involved in an audit at the HGC. I'll have to provide the exact cost for you in writing if you. I have an approximate figure, but that.
Do you have any idea what this auditing was about?
Into the operations of the HGC.
And you don't have an idea of the cost?
It was around $1 million. I don't have the exact figure. I could provide that for you in writing.
Okay. Could you also indicate to us the 10 top big contractors by name at the HDC and the top 10 petty or small contractors at the HDC and their names?
Certainly.
The names of the organizations.
Certainly. I'll ask to provide that in writing to you, to the committee.
And could you also provide this committee with a detailed number of contractors, both large and small and medium, who have been pre-qualified, consistent with your procurement policy?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Before I allow Member Rambarat, I just want to come back to the issue of the building codes and the standards. And I'm sure the public would be interested in finding out the status of the Las Alturas project, Mr. Lyons, in terms of when the demolition will take place and the expected costs. Can you shed some light on that issue?
There's no decision has been taken at this time in terms of doing the demolition, and we have not determined a cost at this point in time.
Member Rambarat.
Thank you, Chairman. to the permanent secretary. I just want to get into, in the context of construction, the current construction program and the future. I just want to get some clarity on the policy. So the context is I just refreshed my memory earlier today. In September 2015, when I was writing for the Express, I wrote, I think the article was titled Surveying the Housing Horrors. And I was making the point, I was reflecting on HDC's appearance before the Joint Select Committee in 2013. And that report was laid in Parliament in 2014. And at that time, there were 176,000 applicants on the HDC database, I believe. The first question is, when we have a number like that, applicants, I want to know if those are qualified applicants or just people who fill out an application form. That's the first question. But even if we work with, let's work with 176,000. I was making the point that at the construction rate or the distribution rate at that time, it would take 70 years to clear the list. But at the same time, we were adding 14,000 new applications every year. And that seemed to me to be an impossible task from a policy point of view. How could we ever reduce that list if we were distributing fewer than the applicants who were being added? And I think currently I understand the Minister of Housing to be dealing with the issue of housing and the government in a different way, in terms of providing land, continuing the HCC program in its current form to finish what has been started, going into the PPPs, and various things, various ways, refurbishment, grants and maintenance support and all of that. But we're still dealing with big numbers. So my second question has to do with, are we creating an expectation or fueling an expectation in the country that we'll have difficulties to satisfy? You have so many people keep talking about wanting an HDC house, waiting on an HDC house, expecting an HDC house. And from a policy point of view, how do we make the shift not only in the way we allocate taxpayers' funds, but how do we make the shift in the minds of the population that in a certain percentage of those cases, those expectations will never be realized?
Thank you, Member. So we all agree that, I think we all agree that we will not be able to supply a house for everyone who desires a house. The list of 176,000 people applying. You pick that up at the assessment stage when persons through the selection process, persons that may be allocated, so they come in and then you realize that they already have a house, or, well, many times they can't afford to pay for a house. They can't afford a mortgage, right? So that is one of the reasons why because we can't produce an HDC house for anyone. That is why we have, as I explained in my earlier, in my opening statement, we need to educate people, right? That is one of the reasons why we have introduced it will be introduced by next week, because we already have a contract signed, through our education program, where we would be letting persons know, look, you need to start taking control of. Some people may not agree with my choice of words, but you need to start taking, taking charge of your life. We will help you, okay? So you could come to us, well, through the education program, through digital means, the internet, all the different digital, social media, all the different social media. We'll be educating persons on how they could get a solution by themselves, which it means, repairing their houses, building annexes, whatever. I mean, I said it already, right? So I think I'm just repeating myself, okay? But, so, we do not have to, the mandate of the ministry is to provide a housing solution. It is not to provide an HEC house. And that is what members of the public need to understand, is a housing solution. And that is why we're also introducing the other programs, such as the aided self-help program, where persons without land, as well as those with land, we will provide them with, those without land, we're giving them developed housing lots. They would have access to the mortgage, the subsidized mortgage loans from TTMF. They will get pre-approved house plans at a peppercorn rate. They will get technical assistance, so that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago need to have a shift in thinking. They do not have to get an HEC house, but a house is a constitutional right. We will help you get that house. It doesn't have to be an HEC house. So I said it could be through the aided self-help program. Even if all the other programs we talk about, the village improvement program, all these other programs, is to help people get a housing solution, not necessarily an HTC house.
I just have a question for HTC. Looking at some of your big projects, like, it seems HEC seems to have been beset with this problem of wastewater treatment plants. And even in the new project, Terrestrial, and I don't know, there are two issues that I picked up, and it really troubled me, that even at this stage, so in Terrestrial, after designs and lotification and the numbers, and you had an idea of how many houses. Somewhere later down the road, WASA indicated that you needed a wastewater treatment plant, which meant going back and scoping or rescoping part of the project and incurring a $32 million capital contribution cost first, and secondly, having to vary the contract that was awarded to Seram Brothers for $85 million or thereabouts. Now, and the variation to Seram was on account of the requirement of the wastewater treatment plant. And that came after the contract. So it tells me that there would have been problems in scoping the project in the first place. And it doesn't stop there. Later on now, TNTech comes along, the discussions with TNTech take place, and in December 2017, TNTech is saying the substation does not have the carrying capacity for that to service that project, and it will require upgrades. But the upgrades in this case would most likely be upgrades to be funded by TNTech, and so now we're asking a different entity to commit to capital works that they would not have budgeted for. And what these things do, the knock-on effect of that is, of course, delays in the project itself, increased costs per unit, and a higher subsidy that the taxpayers must provide. So I come back to where I started, and a common theme throughout all these documents has been proper or improper or inadequate scoping, inadequate contract documents, and a failure to pay attention to the management of these variations. And it is not It is something that carries through all the projects. We have projects here from 2006, that is 12 years now. 2006 with a promise to deliver 400 and whatever units, and 12 years it is still happening, still unfolding, and at the heart of it to me seems to be inadequate attention being paid upfront, as they call it in contracts, front-loading the project, and trying, and you know, when we don't have that attention paid, we run into problems which always ends up being on the backs of the taxpayers.
Remember, let me treat with the issue of the projects that are that date back to 2006. For whatever reason, those projects would have been stalled and or abandoned sometime a few years ago. I don't know the reason. I can't tell you why they would have stopped. What I can say is that HGC has taken a very deliberate approach and plan to restart and complete all those projects, and we've actually started that. Lakeview in Point Fountain is one, Carsonfield in Cashew Gardens in Carsonfield is another. We have a few more. The agency, like I said, has taken a very deliberate decision to restart and complete all those projects. So what you would be seeing there, project going back to 2006, may or may not have been because of any poor planning or poor management. They were stalled at some point in time, and we are committed to completing them. With respect to terrestrial, as far as I'm aware, we were aware of the treatment plant and what was required prior. It is at this stage of the infrastructure work that those plants are now going in, which is planned as far as I am aware. With respect to TNTech did come back to us and say there are some issues with respect to the capacity. That matter has been resolved, again, as far as I'm aware. I know we had a meeting with TNTech and that matter has been resolved, so that is no longer an issue. And I'll ask Mr. Ramrak to add if I may have gone off.
But in the terrestrial project, there was a variation to CRAM's contract for the construction of a lift station, which falls into the requirements of the wastewater treatment plant. And if that was part of the initial project, then it ought to have been included in CRAM's original scope.
I'll ask Mr. Ramrak to treat with that.
All right. Concerning terrestrial projects, CRAM Brothers, the infrastructure contract, the initial WASA outline approval that we received before that contract was engaged had a different route for the wastewater disposal. Subsequent to the contract being signed, we were still in the process finalizing with WASA in terms of the final route. The final route is actually one that took it from the terrestrial project straight to the Malabar treatment plant, which is a longer route. As I said before, this was only finalized between WASA and HGC after the contract was signed. So it was a statutory requirement that was adjusted, and then the contractor on site already, in terms of incurring additional costs in terms of preliminaries, it was added as a valued variation to that contract.
Webster Roy.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Lyons, in the list of current projects under construction that you submitted, the first project on the list is the Bonnier North construction. What is the total yield for that project?
I'll ask Mr. Ramrak to provide these details.
All right, good day again. The total yield for that project is 398 units.
398
So far,
units.
we would have delivered 92 units.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the remainder of 306 units.
So you have an error at the bottom of it, because the reason why I asked the question, you said 92 units have been delivered to date, 48 expected in 2018, right? And then you said at the end of 2019, you're expecting to deliver 388. So that's an error.
Yeah, that's an error.
Okay, if you're only able to deliver 92 units between 2014 and to date, how can you reassure me that you'll be able to deliver the 48 units and then deliver the total by the new deadline, which is 2019?
Okay, this is one of those projects that was a stalled project. It was started back in 2016. Yeah. We've rebaselined the project, and we are fairly confident, funding being available, we can complete it in 2019.
Yeah.
So when the project was restarted, what percent, how far had it gone?
When the project has restarted, most of the infrastructure was already laid in the first phase, which was the 92 units. So we concentrated to complete the 92 units there first. The project has been further progressed in terms of the infrastructure into the other phases, and we intend to deliver in a phase basis from phase 1, which is already completed, going to phase 2, which have more infrastructure already on the ground, and then phase 3 is the least progress, which would be concentrated at a later time when the money is available.
So in terms of your ability to deliver on time, is it linked to financial resources? What strategies are you going to use to ensure that you actually deliver these units according to the time frame?
Yes, that's correct. It is linked to financial resources being available. The strategy that we have adopted is the first phase, and most of the projects, the first phase we will sell those units as best as we can and use the funding from that to roll over until the completion of the project.
Member Antoine?
Yes, good afternoon once again. I want to ask some questions in terms of the abandoned housing units. But before that, I just want to add to what Member Ramarat was saying. And you're speaking about terrestrial, but I'm also seeing a problem with your Bonnet North housing development as well, where WASA has asked for 10 million capital contribution in terms of the wastewater treatment plants again. So in support of what Member Rambert was saying, it seems that you all have problems in terms of your scope of works and the completion of projects dealing with wastewater and WASA, as the case may be. But that was just a statement. In terms of the abandoned houses project, in your response, you said that when you are dealing with abandoned projects, if there is a existing contractor, you renegotiate the start of the project. If there is no contractor in place, you invite tenders. And you give a list of projects we started in Point Fontaine, in La Brea, in Guapo, San Fernando, Bonnier, and also in Malabar. I want to know what is the current, are there currently contractors for all these abandoned housing developments? What is the status of the abandoned units? And what problems are you encountering in dealing with these projects that were abandoned in the past and now you have restarted to get them back on stream?
There are contracts and contractors in place for all those projects listed there. In fact, I think a couple of them might have been completed since then. Member, can you repeat the question?
What problems are you encountering? Are you encountering significant problems in terms of when refurbishing abandoned projects?
No, remember, we won't call them significant problems. They're what we would consider to be routine construction issues that the project development group and the construction management group have rescoped and so on. And we've advised the contractors that this is what is required to bring them to completion. We can't say that we've been experiencing any significant problems per se with respect to them.
Webster Roy?
Thanks. Just following on the same issue of the abandoned housing units. In your written submission, you noted that project managers from HDC staff are assigned to project manage the refurbishment work taking place on restarted projects. The project managers use a series of quality tools, including HDC's 22-point certification program to ensure a quality product. Could you outline the quality tools for me, please?
Certainly, I'll ask Mr. Ramarak to take us through that.
With reference to the 22-point certification quality program that we have, I could go through the actual listing here. It would actually start being a phase basis, just in the same manner in which a unit is being constructed. So you would start off with the earthworks, go into setting out afterwards, excavation of the building works, reinforcement, pre-concrete pour, block work, backfilling and compaction, formwork, ring beam and lintel beam, doors and door frames, windows, glazing, roof, fixtures, finishes, asphalt and other pavings, piles and floorboard fills, plumbing for property, plumbing for infrastructure, electrical common services, electrical building works. What I have called out here is actually the head or the heads of each inspection form, which are 22 inspection forms. So for the various stages that we would receive the units in, or the units would progress into, they will have to be signed off by the site inspectors or the project managers, and only when it's signed off, then they could go on to the next stage. What is also important with this is actually tied to the contractor's payments. Only when the inspection forms are signed off, it must accompany the application for payment, for payments to be certified.
From the inspection forms, what are the quality tools? Because you said quality tools including the 22-point certification. I'm assuming that the forms and the different areas you called out would be linked to the 22-point certification, right? So what other tools are utilized?
Well, the other tools would be like the soft skills in terms of the techniques being utilized. The tools would be the physical tools on site, which would be measuring tapes, the project managers doing the inspection, visual inspection, using the drawings, using the specifications under the contract. The other techniques that I mentioned before is the soft skills would be utilizing international project management techniques. We utilize the body of knowledge from PMBOK. That is the author of that is the Project Management Institute from the USA. But project management techniques are not utilized or cannot be enforced without proper contract management. So we have proper contract management documents, and that is what gives us the strength to enforce these techniques on site. And for instance, if a contractor is not adhering to the quality specifications under the contract, we write him under the particular contract clause, referencing the infractions, and give him a particular time to rectify the issues. If that doesn't happen within the particular time, another notice is given, and then it could escalate into a notice to correct. And finally, if it's still elaborated, it could be termination to the contract.
If I may just follow up with regards to the abandoned projects, and just to ask if there are any abandoned housing developments which have not been restarted, and if the answer is yes, could you identify those developments and provide the reasons for those not being restarted?
Yeah. There are three projects that come to mind. There's Oasis in Shogunas, there's Amon Court in Mova, and Ed Towers in Shogunas, sorry. The reason is simply funding. They are scheduled to be completed though.
Any indication of a time frame, or you can't say at this point?
It's difficult to say, but we are hoping that we could have sufficient funds that we could, if not complete, certainly start them this year.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask another aspect. You know, recently on the news, I would have seen the issue of a handicapped or differently abled person being carried in the news with regards to being assigned a unit. And the allegation was that the unit was in a higher floor, which I find difficult to believe. But the point I'm making is that in terms of the provision of units for handicapped or differently able or physically challenged applicants, you indicated that you had a 5% allocation of units. Can you explain or indicate what formula was used to come up with that 5%? How long has this been the policy? And has this policy, are you giving any consideration to revising the policy?
Okay. There's a cabinet-approved allocation policy that says 5% of housing units are to be allocated to the disabled and elderly. That is the rationale in which we came up with the 5%. There's an international benchmark that says 1 in every 100 houses should be provided. 1 disabled unit for every 100 units should be provided. We are saying we are going beyond that.
In your experience, has this been an adequate allocation? Or do you face challenges? I'm just trying to get a feel of what happens in practice.
So we can talk about a couple developments where we have significant number of units that have been allocated for the disabled. Greenvale up in the east, and Cashew Gardens, Carsonfield and Cashew Gardens, where entire sections of the community were designated for handicap units. There's now a concerted effort in all the developments that we do, in all new construction, to certainly put handicap units in all of those units.
And in terms of the other facilities in all of your developments, are they already handicap accessible, or in those where they are not, are you looking at making improvements to facilitate these residents?
Yes, yes. In the older developments, there are some limitations, and we are looking at making those improvements.
Member Mark.
Yes, thank you. Madam Permanent Secretary and Mr. Lyons, we had asked a question to the effect whether there was a quota that each contractor can secure as it relates to projects by the HDC or issued by the HDC. And I beg your pardon, and your response was no. Could you explain, in an effort to ensure that there is no monopoly of projects by any one particular grouping of contractors, why it is that the HDC is prepared to give one contractor, according to your answer, maybe 10 or 15 projects, or maybe less? What is the reason for that? Because that is what we ask, whether there's a quota or whether, for instance, persons are allocated a certain number of projects so that there will be equity and evenness among the contractors. Could you try to?
Well, remember, you're correct. I mean, we are saying that there's no quota. We're also saying that there's no intent or objective to have it heavily weighted in any one contractor. The selection, for instance, will be based on capacity and ability to perform and so on, and experience and all of that. So it's not designed to treat with any particular set of people. It's open.
Do you have any experience where one contractor, you know, has been provided with maybe, let's say, a disproportionate amount of projects at the expense of other contractors who would have been properly qualified to access those contracts? Has there been any such experience under your watch?
Certainly not under my watch, Member Mark.
Okay. May I also ask Mr. Lyons, I saw in the newspapers Tuesday, the 2nd of January, 2018, and I think that you were at a prayer meeting, I think, some Pentecostal church, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I think you gave an address an address was given by you. And you did give an indication to the country that the HGC plans, the headline is, or was, the HGC plans to build 8 towers in Europe. You want to explain to us what are the implications of the construction of these 8 towers, the value of those 8 towers, and how will these towers impact on prime agricultural lands, and whether, for instance, the HEC has a policy on that issue?
Member Mark, let me first clarify. I was at a public consultation. It was held at the Presbyterian Church, I think.
Oh, I thought you were
Pentecostal, sorry, Pentecostal Church.
Well, I beg your pardon. Yeah, I beg your pardon.
Okay.
I thought you were...
It was a public consultation.
I thought you were administering some projects.
No.
Okay, no problem.
No. And the consultation, Member Mark, really was to invite members of the public and stakeholders to comment and give feedback on how they think HGC constructing 8 towers, thereabouts, in that area will impact on them. That's really what it was about. Coming out of comments and so on that we got there, and with another session we had with stakeholders and so on, statutory authorities and so on, that information will be fed into the final designs that we come up with. All right, including there was some young members of we raised an issue there that about the agricultural lands and so on, and they had a suggestion. They asked us in our designs, take into consideration urban farming or urban agriculture, and it is something that we are looking at.
Are these lands, when you said state lands, I know the state land, but is it owned or under the control of the University of the West Indies, or is it something separate from what UE has control over that is properly fenced? Because I normally traverse the Southern Main Road, and I know that that area is properly fenced. Is that the area that is being earmarked by you,
I don't
or by the HGC?
I'm not sure we're talking about the same area, but it is off of Farm Road there. And as far as I'm aware, it is, or was under the control of Ministry of Agriculture.
Okay. Oh, so it is not UE's land?
But as far as I know, no. But
just Ministry. All right. I just wanted to go back to an earlier point that I had raised. You did indicate to us, and tell me if I'm wrong, that the HGC had expended, is it $1.3 million for some audit that was conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers? Is it 1.3 million?
I said I wasn't sure of the exact figure, and I provided to the committee.
Oh, right. Now, was there an executed agreement between the parties?
Yes, there was.
Is that agreement private, public? Can you make that document available to this committee?
I'll have to consult with my legal folks.
Well, I'm
assuming if it is, then certainly.
Well, I must advise you, if you're not aware, that the power of this committee deals with asking for records and papers. So I don't want you to be under the false impression that if you consult with your legal counsel and they tell you no, that you will come and tell us no. So I want you to be aware of that. If you would like to advise this committee, because of the nature of the document, you would prefer to have a private meeting or meeting in camera, that is an option available. So I just want you to be guided accordingly as it relates to matters of that nature.
So noted, Member Mark.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some initial areas and so on I wanted to deal with. But I just want to follow up on what the chairman had asked. Could you tell us, Mr. Brent Lyons, whether there has been some redesigning of HGC properties in order to facilitate the physically challenged? Or is it something futuristic, meaning that as you construct new homes, new housing settlements, whether private or public or a combination of both, the redesigning of these homes will take into account the needs of the physically challenged, or is that being taken into account now by the HDC?
Both, Member Mark. There's some retrofitting that we're doing with some units, as well as all new designs we're putting all new projects we are having designs in place for the physically challenged.
Any document that you have available that can guide this committee, and by extension, the population of this country, as to that thrust on the part of the HDC?
I'm sure we have, because we have our architects, they do a lot of work with respect to that, so I'm sure we could provide something.
No, I don't, you're guessing. What I'm saying is this: is there a policy document that the agency has designed to address the challenges of the physically disabled, and is that policy available that can be provided in those circumstances to this committee? Is there a specific policy in that area, written document on this matter?
Member Mark, the written document is the allocation policy, which says 5% of housing units are to be provided to the disabled and elderly. We are guided by that.
No, I understand that. I have seen that in the document.
Right.
But what I'm asking is whether, if we want to educate the public on this whole question, I'm asking whether you have a physical document that you will make available to the physically challenged community, so that they would know that apart from you being able to allocate a 5%, there is a document which represents a policy indicating to them that the AGC has committed itself to redesigning its operations, its building, its settlements, to ensure that those physically challenged people are taken care of. That is what I'm trying to find out. Is there a policy to that effect?
Member Mark, so, okay. There are a couple issues. We are guided by the allocation policy.
Right.
And from an operations standpoint, we have the project development unit staffed with architects and so on, who are saying, in our designs, based on that policy, we have been catering for the physically challenged, both in terms of new designs as well as having retrofitted some existing buildings.
Okay. All right. Continue, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Member Raful.
Thank you. In going through the documents that were provided, it was shown that HDC was allocated $672 million this year. And in the question about the breakdown of that expenditure, the information was provided on the loan payments and bond payments. In total, it's showing about $2 billion in loans and about $2.5 billion in bonds. It was also mentioned that there's about $850 million owing to contractors. My question is, what is the total current liabilities of HDC?
I'll invite Mr. Devonish to provide us with that information.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll have to provide that in writing.
Okay.
But it would be a combination of those two.
Do you have a rough estimate?
Well, the loans, the $840 million, those are current outstanding debts to contracts. Someone. The loans, I don't think, become payable until as early as 2019 or 2021. But I'll have to check those figures. So total debt would be the combination of the 8 and the 2 point. Sorry, it's the loans and the bonds. Yeah.
And in terms of value for money, we have had, the HDC was created in 1999, correct?
2005.
2005, my apologies. 2005. Do you have a rough estimate of the total expenditure between 2005 to the present?
Yeah, that can be provided to you.
Okay. And how many houses have been built in that time, between 2005 and the present?
That can also be provided.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Lyons, I just want to address the issue of maintenance of HTC units. As you would appreciate, there's quite a bit of valuable stock, housing stock, under the control of the HTC. Can you indicate to us what is the HTC's process for the receipt and the resolution of complaints regarding maintenance services for which it is liable? Perhaps you can preface that by giving an overview as to what policy you have towards maintenance in general.
Right. Vice Chair, the policy of the agency is to provide maintenance to primarily its rental communities and to some extent some common spaces in its mortgage communities. The agency adopts a proactive preventative maintenance program. We have maintenance inspections, for instance, daily, weekly, monthly, annually, and so on. And there's some things that we do at those times. With respect to the collection or receipt of complaints, we do have a system. We have nine area offices that persons within those communities can go and report a complaint. Folks can also call in to our estate management division, and they also walk into our head office to provide any concerns or complaints that they have. When those complaints are received, they are prioritized and dealt with as required.
Would you be in a position to provide, perhaps in writing, maybe not at this time, but perhaps in writing, or if you can, the average time lag between a complaint and the resolution, especially in the areas of perhaps plumbing, masonry, and roof repairs?
Right, so let me just say, the agency treats with plumbing, electrical, and sewer issues as emergency type things. We have a schedule that to respond to those within a 28 to 48 hour period. But just to give you a sense, we have some categories here, a priority matrix. So if we consider a complaint or some issue to be an emergency, we say that we have to respond within 1 to 12 hours. And a definition of that would be some injury or loss of life or damage to property and so on. We have another category called high, that's where we will respond within 1 to 24 hours, and that would be flood water, sewer, pumps out of service, or power outage. Some unsafe conditions or so. If we have something that is imminent, garbage pile up, for instance, broken window panes, 24 to 48 hours. A normal request, a defective component, or some fixture or fitting in the unit, we say between 1 to 14 days. And low, which is cosmetic work, some unsightly appearance, within a 3-week period.
Can you, now you mentioned that there are 9 area offices that residents can file a complaint at. Is there currently something like a hotline or a social media platform that residents can utilize to bring to the attention of the HDC on a more immediate basis problems?
Yeah, there is a line at the estate management office that persons the call center that persons can call into. There's also our Facebook page that persons have been submitting complaints online, and we've been responding.
Thank you. Member Mark?
Yes, this is directed to the Permanent Secretary. In your submission, you did indicate that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, in order to ensure and to maintain that guidelines and proper procedures are adhered to in the construction of housing projects and units, that you have established what you call an internal committee And this internal committee carries out a number of functions, again, to deal with consistency and to ensure that procedures are adhered to. Could you help this committee in identifying who are the members of this internal committee established to review board meeting minutes of the agencies, and what are their designations? Agencies, as you know, WASA would be involved in that, I would imagine. How often does this committee meet? When last did that particular committee meet? And how does the ministry keep abreast of what is happening at HDC outside of board meetings? And does the ministry have representation on the board of HDC?
Okay. Thank you, Member Mark. Okay, I will start off. The committee, the internal committee, reviews the board minutes of our agencies, which would be LSA, UDCOT, Silwick, Eastside, New City, and East Port of Spain. All right. Technocrats, well, staff members form this committee. So we have like our different members of the. We have the head of legal. We have one of our senior planning officer is on the committee. We have our legal officer 1 is on the committee. The former deputy permanent secretary is supposed to head the committee, but unfortunately currently without a deputy permanent secretary. So for the past 4 months, the committee has not formally met for 4 months. However, the individuals, when I received the minutes, I sent it to the individuals that I would have outlined, and they would go through it, and they would identify any issues, and they would send it to me, and I would in turn bring it to the attention of the minister. So I have to admit, in the absence of a DPS and my inability, I don't have the time because I'm handling the portfolio of a DPS and the PS. But the individuals are looking at, they peruse it, and they identify anything that looks, a bit suspicious, and they will bring it to my attention, and I in turn bring it to the attention of the minister.
But have you discovered any activities that you consider to be irregular in terms of proper guidelines and procedures?
Actually, no.
So things have been going smoothly, as far as you're concerned?
From
the perspective of that internal committee monitoring and ensuring that guidelines and procedures are properly adhered to?
Well, the minutes would have indicated a particular issue which I can't comment on because it's before the courts.
Okay.
That's an issue East Port of Spain, but I can't comment on it because I know it's a court matter right now.
Yeah. But you can put it in writing to us.
Okay.
The court does not prevent you or any person coming before this committee from writing us, because this is a confidential committee as well, as you know.
Yeah.
So you can put it in writing.
Okay.
I just wanted to follow up and ask you, what, in terms of systems in place to monitor the maintenance of housing developments and units, you advanced that maintenance workers are stationed at 9 strategic area offices, which are placed within close proximity to HGC developments in order to monitor the day-to-day operations and functions of units, rental units in particular. And that would deal with allocation needs, age, and development of buildings, criticality of issue, natural disasters, etc. Would you share with us whether these 9 offices are sufficient to monitor the day-to-day functions of rental units throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Could you also tell us where these offices are located? Could you tell us also how does the HDC protect itself from delinquent or destructive homeowners as well as tenants? I have 3 more. You can take notes. Is the HDC pleased with this arrangement, Madam Permanent Secretary? And is there a prescribed time frame for response to maintenance requests? And is this time frame adhered to? These are some of the areas that we would like to have some clarification on.
Minister Lyons will address.
Mr. Minister.
No, Mr. Lyons. Maybe I'm proclaiming.
Member Mark. Well,
or if not, you can give us a summary, and we will send the questions to you, and you can do that.
I'll appreciate that. Thanks, Member Mark. But just to give a sense, we have satisfied Member Mark that the 9 areas are strategically placed and sufficient to be able to reach each community of the HDC. With respect to these specific locations, I'll ask Mr. McDonald to take me through that in a little bit. With respect to the prescribed timeframes, I think I called that out early on, and it is based on the nature of the complaint. We respond accordingly. And you're asking whether we're satisfied with the... in general, I'd say yes. Yes, we are. I'll ask Mr. McDonald to list out the areas for me now.
Good afternoon, member. The areas with the area offices that currently exist are Princestown, San Fernando, Couva, Maloney, Morva, and Port of Spain. Port of Spain is divided into three areas, though, which would be Port of Spain East, which is in Beetham, sorry, Port of Spain West, which is in Cocorate, and Port of Spain Central, which actually has 2 offices, one on Duncan Street and one at Trafford Court. Those offices are all staffed by facility manager, facility supervisors, and various levels of tradesmen and administrative support. And they respond to maintenance requests on a daily basis to treat with maintenance type issues. They also provide oversight for monthly services, monthly contracted services by which would include garbage collection, grass cutting, and so on. Pest control, yeah.
Mr. Lyons, do you have dedicated contractors at your various HGC settlements or annual sites that would be responsible through these offices for maintenance purposes? Or is that done by the unionized workforce? Or do you have private engaged contractors to carry out these activities in those settlements that you have under your purview and or control?
Member Mark, it's a combination of both. In some areas, we have contracted services for grass cutting and garbage collection and so on, and pest control. And in other areas, we have our maintenance workers who would do more of the trades.
And these private contractors, you would engage them through your tendering procedure and so on?
Yes.
Would you want to identify for us how many contractors you would have on board at your various sites at this time, and the names of these contractors and what are the values of their contracts? Or would you want to supply that in writing?
I'll have to supply that in writing, Member Mark.
All right. Mr. Chairman, if you would allow me, I want to go to abandoned homes just to fully elaborate on matters to edify my own understanding of the challenges. HGC has indicated that they do encounter significant challenges or problems when refurbishing abandoned housing development projects. Would you want to share with this committee what are those significant challenges or problems you encounter when refurbishing abandoned housing development projects? And first of all, if you could clarify for us what are those significant problems and how have you been able to overcome those significant problems? And as I'm on that, let us deal with gangs who invade the private spaces of legitimate citizens and tenants under HGC control. And we have read in the papers, Mr. Lyons, where gangs in different parts of the country have been engaged in that kind of activity, striking terror and fear into tenants. So as I'm on that subject matter as well, could you tell us how the HDC has been treating with that question of gangs, and how do you guarantee your tenants' safety and security in terms of occupation and sleeping properly at night without any invasion of their private spaces? Could you share with us as well on that? So I have two areas, the abandonment and secondly, gang invasion of HGC property dislocated in the process, legitimate tenants.
Member Mark, I can't recall saying that we've had significant difficulties in in the refurbishment of abandoned units and so on. There'll be issues of funding, there'll be issues of having to rescope and so on. Issues that we would experience, there would be, I would call it, normal or routine construction type issues. The issue of gangs or criminal activity in some of our communities is real. It is a real issue. And in the same newspapers you mentioned, you would also see that we've been working very closely with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We've been providing tremendous support to us with respect to HGC identifying and doing evictions and so on, and we've had to do it repeatedly in some areas. The TTPS has in fact been taking a leading role in that. They have arrested some persons and taken them before the court and so on. It is a challenge. It is a real significant challenge.
Could you give us a status report? What is the current situation? Do you have any challenges as we speak where legitimate tenants have been dislocated and their premises overtaken by members of gangs? Or would you say at this material point in time, the police and the defense force, through your arrangement with them, have that matter completely under control?
I would describe it as a work in progress, Member Mark. We've had some significant successes, I say, but there are a few communities that we still have some challenges with, and we have a targeted program to treat with that.
Well, remember, on the matter of abandoned properties, I may have said that you said you did not encounter, and that is what I read. You did not encounter, not you encounter.
Oh, sorry.
You did not encounter significant challenges or problems. And I just wanted you to clarify for our committee, when you said you did not encounter significant challenges or problems, what did you mean by significant in the context that you used to? What were, what you had in mind, or what are the real situation that you are faced with when that caused you to say, well, look, I do not encounter significant problems when dealing with refurbishment of abandoned properties?
Member Mark, I think the question for me was, did I encounter significant problems? And my response was, no, I did not encounter significant problems. On any refurbishment project, there's the issue you have to scope the thing. and have work start and so on. Invariably, throughout the process, you may come up on some issue that you probably either didn't expect or maybe have some challenges, but it would be what I deem to be routine construction issue. I really don't see it as anything significant. There's always an engineering solution, for instance, so it really isn't significant. I'd like to make the point, however, we've been talking quite a lot, and not only now, about HDC having abandoned properties and so on, almost to give out the impression that there is a strategy to have abandoned properties or policy. I want to make it abundantly clear. There is no policy or strategy to have abandoned properties. The opposite is quite true. The agency does not want to have any abandoned properties. We have inherited some projects that were left stalled or abandoned that we are now treating with. And we are saying that we will complete all as provided funds are available and so on. So we want to make the point. We are not in the business of having abandoned properties or treating with it like that. That is in nobody's interest. It is to have the units completed and allocated, which is what we're about.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Before I allow Member Raful, I just want to, on the issue of the abandoned properties, can you indicate, do you have an idea of the number of units that would have been involved in, if you were to sum up all of these abandoned units, what we're talking about?
Okay. And put in some context, abandoned and or vandalized or stalled projects and so on. In January 2012, we would have done an assessment and identified about 1,200 units that you can consider abandoned/vandalized. Over the past 2 years, we've been working really hard to refurbish those units and allocate them. We are now down to under 200 of those units that remain to be repaired.
So you're saying that you've brought back on almost 1,000 of those units until
yes.
available for residents.
Yeah, and we have actually allocated.
Yeah. I just wanted to follow up with a question. And just a quote from your submission: the resources required to maintain a vast amount of units can be reduced by transferring this responsibility to the homeowners and tenants via establishment and implementation of homeowners association or management companies. This is a common practice in developments abroad and so on. Can you perhaps update us as to what the HCC's thoughts are on this and how far forward you may be in terms of implementing such a policy and such an initiative?
Okay. Sure, Vice Chair. The PS in her opening remarks did talk about a pilot project by the HCC where we are doing just that. We have now introduced a maintenance fee along with either your rent or your mortgage payment, and that is used to defray cost of maintenance. It is the way that the HCC plans to go for the future. It may be a challenge in some of the older communities, particularly where they based on what the rent is and so on. But it is the way that we are proposing to go. We will be looking at the results that we get from the pilot project that we've started. We anticipate it will go well, and we'll be able to transfer this into future projects.
Can I ask you just to share the initial response so far? Because there's a culture shift here we're talking about. Yeah. So I'm just curious as to how the HCC residents are treating with this initiative.
Right. So, Vice Chair, what we've done, we've put it at the point of allocation. So when we say to you, your total payment is X, it includes let's call it the rental fee of Y plus some maintenance fee of S to get to this new figure. So you see one new figure now, and which is what you accept, but part of it is used to pay the maintenance fee.
These associations also require some degree of leadership within the community in terms of residents taking ownership, not only of the properties, but of course the organization, and being able to lead and chair these organizations and so on. What has been your experience so far with this?
Right. There has been some reluctance, and the HDC is holding the hands of those management companies. It is an education process. We are working with the communities, and we think over time they will recognize, people will recognize the benefit of it, as well as the autonomy which it gives them to be able to take charge of their circumstance.
Are there any initiatives or measures that you take to instill some sense of pride and ownership in these communities?
Right. So what we have been attempting to do is to, through the neighborhood groups and beautification projects, to have the residents recognize it. I mean, if you take ownership and you basically manage your community, it will be to your benefit. We've seen some willingness, if I could describe it like that, with a couple of them.
Member Raful.
Thank you. I had a follow-up question from what I asked earlier about PPPs. The question that I'd asked was for an elaboration on the PPPs, the public-private partnerships. The answer I received was not answering my question, but I think it's because I didn't ask quite clearly. What I'm wondering about is the model of PPPs that are either in the pipeline or being looked at. There's different models, and I'm curious to see exactly what models are being looked at by HDC.
Yeah. Remember, we actually did not answer that part of your question. And I'll invite Mr. McQuilkin to take us through that.
Thank you.
Remember, the model that we're using is a simple design, build, finance one. Mm-hmm. We have two parts. We have the one where on the HDC lands, we ask the contractors to come and bid on a specified scope, asking them to design, build, and bring their funding. We have a second one where we ask them to do that, plus they bring their lands as well. So the figures that we gave you before, we actually have a 50% split. Half of it is design, build, finance, and half of it is design, yes, on the HDC lands, and half of it is with the contractors bringing their own lands. Does that answer your question?
A little bit. Can you just expand on that?
I'm not clear in what direction you'd like for me to go.
To recap, you're saying that it's 50% design, build, finance.
No, I just said that it's a half and half between the two types. Mm-hmm. One with the HDC lands and one with the contractors' lands.
Remember, just to clarify, this is Mr. McQuilkin is referring to the existing PPP projects that we have already contracted. There are 8 projects, 4 design build finance using HDC lands and 4 design build finance using private lands. The contractor brought his own lands. That I think was just pure coincidence. It was nothing deliberate, really.
Okay. So the finance component is still done by HDC?
No, all the financing is brought by the contractor.
Okay. So the contractor would design, build, finance, and HDC just buys it afterwards?
Yes.
So the only difference then is that part is on public lands and part is on, well, half and half. Half are on public lands, half are on private lands.
Yes, and that's just purely coincidence.
Okay. So there's no PPP for the operation and maintenance. It's just for the construction.
That is correct.
That's correct, just a construction.
Okay. I had another question about the aided self-help program. I really appreciated hearing about it. I think it's really quite innovative, and I really appreciated hearing what the Permanent Secretary said about revising the ministry's mandate to provide housing solutions, but not necessarily provide housing. And I'm curious to hear a bit more about the program. When did it start its rollout? What are the metrics looking at the objectives and the impacts of it? And then I have some more follow-up questions, but I'll start with those before I add too many. So what was the timeline? When did it start? How is it being, what are the objectives of it? And what are the metrics being used to assess the objectives and the achievement of them?
Thank you, Member. So I will start, and then I will hand over to Mr. Hussain to give more details. So it's what I like about this program. It's a program involving the ministry itself, the HGC, and the LSA. So the fact is, I think this is maybe the only program we have such close, 3 agencies being involved in it. All right, Mr. Hussain, because the LSA is the most heavily involved in it, and he will give the background. There's the history and that sort of thing.
So the the program was launched last year. The initial phase of collecting applications started around October, November last year. So far, we have passed that phase. We're now in the processing phase of applications. But a little background into the program. The program intends to provide fully developed lots. The state is developing lots, fully developed lots. LSA is part of that the agencies who is developing lots. These lots are being made available to persons, qualified persons under the program, who will construct homes on their own. Of course, they will be given technical assistance by the agencies, the HDC, the LSA, the ministry itself, for construction of these homes. They're also being provided with plans, fully approved plans, and as PS mentioned before, there's also financing available through the TTMF. There are 2% and 5% loans available for financing. It's an aided self-help program. The name itself spells out that, in that the construction of the homes is being managed by the individuals and not by the ministry or any one of the agencies. The individual enters into contracts with the preferred contractor that he chooses. There's a list of contractors that are available from the HDC. They can choose one of those, or you can come with your own contractor. You can come with your own house plan if you so desire, or you can choose one of the plans that is available at the ministry. Apart from that, the LSA and the HDC will be supervising construction during the home construction, supervising home construction, using HDC's 22-point plan. And that is significant, because we want to ensure at the end of the day that we have quality housing. This program is not one where you get land from the ministry and you keep the land. There's a period of time of 2 years in which you must construct your home, because you're provided with all the facilities to make sure that that happens. If there are any further questions or any clarity that you need.
Objectives and metrics for assessing those.
Okay, in the first phase of the program, there are 1,000 lots that are available, fully developed lots that are available for construction of homes. So the first objective, our first target, is to distribute those 1,000 lots to qualified citizens, and to start construction by June of this year, construction of homes by June of this year, and to complete the first phase of construction by 1 year from then, from June. At this time, we are looking to make available further lots, further developed lots, so we can have the second phase of the program rollout.
So in a nutshell, the objectives are linked to the amount of available land and units.
That's it.
And making sure that everything is done according to the quality control set out by the HDC's 22-point plan.
Yes.
So it's numbers and quality.
That's it.
What about costs?
Okay, costs. Development costs. Let's talk about development cost of land. So we are trying to keep the development cost of the land as low as possible. The average development cost per lot, it's around 100 to 120,000 per lot, a fully developed lot with full infrastructure, roads, drains, paved roads, drains, electricity, water, all the facilities. It's a fully approved lot as well, with all the approvals from the regulatory agencies, Town and Country, WASA, the regional corporations. That's our intention. With respect to the housing units, as I said before, these will be constructed by the individuals. But again, because of the parameters that we have put in place, we will ensure that quality housing is constructed.
Great, thank you.
Can I just
follow-up question?
I just wanted to add, sorry, can I just add one thing? Just for the information of the committee, at the close of registration, we had 118 applicants with land, who had land, and we had 5,018 persons without land. So, there was considerable interest in the program. But we just want to assure the committee, however, that the process of selection, will be very transparent. We will be employing the services of an auditing firm. I don't have the name of the firm as yet, but that is to assure the members that it will be a transparent process. And we have, we have set criteria. For example, 70% of the applicants will be selected via a modified weighted system. 30% will be selected on recommendation of Minister with responsibility for housing, which is again is in keeping. It's similar to our national allocation policy, which always gives the minister some ministerial discretion.
I had a follow-up question about that. So the director of the CEO of the LSA, Land Settlement Agency, had said that it was for qualified persons, meaning eligible persons. So that, I know normally the LSA only really works with squatter regularization. So this is persons who are under the $84,000 income bracket per year or the $44,000 income bracket per year. What is the eligibility requirement?
In fact, the qualifying income, it's a maximum of $25,000 household income per month.
Okay, per month.
Per month.
Okay. And if you are above that threshold?
No, you're not. So your income must be below $25,000, up to $25,000 per month. And that's household income.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For clarification, to Mr. Hussain, the 2-year period, is it a complete construction of the house?
The intention is to distribute and complete construction for the first phase by June of next year.
I'm talking about an applicant under the aided self-help program who receives land at a subsidized cost, has 2 years. Is it a complete construction?
Yes. Remember, the intention is for a complete unit, to have a complete unit by the end of that period.
Good. And you referred to the $25,000 limit. Does that include allowances, the salary, $25,000? Does it include allowances?
It's total gross income.
Member Antoine?
Yes, I have 2 questions involving maintenance at your development at Madu Heights. One is concerning the roof repairs. Is that under the remit of the AGC? And the other is with regard to your sewer problems. Does this fall under the AGC for units at Madu Heights?
Remember, let me invite Mr. McDonald to treat with those questions.
Member, with respect to road repairs, I need to check some of our the roof repairs. Oh yeah, roof repairs at Madu Heights. Okay, I didn't hear the question clearly. Sorry about that. The roof repairs is something that we would fall under our remit, and I can have someone look at that in short order, right? The other question, but the sewer, all right? So we are still managing about 72 wastewater treatment facilities. I will check with the building services manager to determine whether it's one of the facilities that we are dealing with, and if not, he's someone that liaises with WASA on a daily basis to try to bring redress to communities that are affected by soil. And I just want to reiterate that we treat soil complaints as emergencies. Sometimes work is extensive, so it takes a couple of days to get done. WASA also has limited resources to respond to some of these issues as well. But the MD has given support to my department to treat with these things immediately. I am called at all hours of the day and night. As soon as he gets it or it comes from wherever, we try to get either the O&M contractors on it, which would be operation and maintenance contractors, or engage the WASA services where necessary.
How soon can we expect the response from you?
I would say by tomorrow morning, I will look into it. Madhuai, right?
Member Ramrod.
Yeah, just my final question. The Minister of Finance last year in the budget announced a new housing incentive for persons involved in construction. What has been the impact of that announcement on your PPP projects and projects in general?
The housing construction incentive program is yet to be formally rolled out. A lot, if not all, the work has been done. It's ready, and once it's announced, I mean, persons will be able to come on. What I can say, however, is the requests and response and inquiries that we have had with respect to that program has been tremendous. I think quite a number of people are just waiting for it to be rolled out and to be able to take advantage of it.
Just a follow-up question. When I looked at the way the projects are being handled in Moruga, where you're allocating to several contractors fewer units for construction, and based on the contracts which were awarded for Moruga, on average, construction cost is estimated to be about 600,000 per unit. Is that a more appropriate model for HDC when it's doing its own contracting, to use more contractors constructing fewer units? Or is there still a preference for single contractors with large number of units?
Remember, just to clarify, those units are actually coming in under $600,000. And what we have attempted to do in Moruga in particular is to spread it to as many contractors as possible because of there's a pure economic situation. We think that as a fairer, more equitable distribution of work and projects.
If I may just go back to the issue of maintenance, Mr. Lyons, with regards to garbage collection, can you say what the process is in terms of garbage collections in communities? Specifically, I'm referring to a situation in one particular community where large bins have been placed, which obviously will be emptied by the contractor. And there's a concern by some residents that the bins are being placed in the front of their homes instead of a designated area, and that can pose both a health and a crime hazard. Can you address that?
The bins are generally placed in designated areas, yes, away from units. If there's a report of a bin being placed inappropriately or too close to someone's unit, we will definitely take a look at it and treat with it.
You're saying that it should not be placed in front of a resident's home per se?
Well, there are designated areas where I wouldn't necessarily say in front or behind, but sufficiently away from not to be a nuisance and to cause issues and so on.
Thank you. Before I allow Member Mark, I just wanted to ask a question with regards to the sugar, the SILWC and the HTC. And the question would be, what is the status of the housing developments under the purview of the SILWC? And does the SILWC engage in maintenance of housing developments under its purview?
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman. Silvic has under its purview about 25 housing developments, and we are charged with maintaining all of our housing developments. Silwick was without a board for approximately 2 years, so there was very little maintenance taking place during that period because of the Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Act. Only the board can instruct works to be done within the developments. A new board was installed in August of last year. Unfortunately, the financial year came to an end in September, so there was very little that we could have done during that period. However, at the start of the new financial year, the board has been actively working and doing maintenance works within the housing development. For example, in Orangefield, WASA had started a sewer treatment plant, but because of the lack of a board, work had to stop. Now that a board is in place, we have restarted the project because those lands in Orangefield were allotted to the recipients, the visa recipients from currently 1975 Limited. And as soon as that work's finished, then we will resurvey the lots and hand them over to the recipients so that they can build their homes.
Member Mark.
Yes, Madam Permanent Secretary. I don't know if you're aware of the 9th report of a Joint Select Committee on Ministry Statutory Authorities, and it is for the 2013-2014 fourth session of the 10th Parliament, and it was laid on the 24th of June in the Senate and the 25th of June 2014, respectively, in the House of Representatives. I want to bring to your attention the following, and these were recommendations that were sent to the Ministry of Housing. We, on page 66 of this report, it gives the following formula that has been the practice at the HDC and the Ministry of Housing as it relates to the allocation of housing units. 60% via a modified random selection process. 25% on the recommendation of the Minister for Special Emergencies. 10% for the protective services, 5% for senior citizens, and physically challenged people or persons. You have just told this committee that that has been unilaterally changed, meaning that that area that you have mentioned in terms of the new policy, in terms of lots being distributed to citizens, if I heard you correctly, you said 70% will be done by the LSA through a proper system that you are going to establish to ensure that there's transparency. And you said 30% would be allocated consistent with what the policy of the HEC and the ministry would have been. I'm just letting you know what the policy has been or the practice. The minister never had 30%. The minister always had 25%. But I want to go further, Madam Permanent Secretary, to page 67. Because you see, we live in a world where the sun shines every day. And some places, of course, it's dark. But in most parts of the world, there's sunshine. And the rays of the sun really penetrate deeply to ensure transparency and accountability. I want to read for you a recommendation which was sent to your ministry in the year that I've just read for you. It dealt with this minister, any minister, having this power to allocate 25%. They said in order to introduce greater transparency and accountability in the process used by the minister to allocate houses in his own discretion, the committee recommend that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development document the process and criteria used by the minister to justify his allocations. A list of names and the location of the houses allocated by the ministers and the rationale for his decision should be subjected to public scrutiny. I want to refer you to this report and to ask you whether you have received this report, and since there has been no objection to this recommendation, whether this recommendation has been implemented by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
Okay, thank you, member. Because I was before my time, I personally have not seen the document, and I could probably say the same for the minister because he's pretty new to the ministry. However, I just wanted to point out a difference. The policy you alluded to in that report is the allocation policy for HGC provided houses. Okay, that's your 60% via modified random selection, 25 ministerial discretion, 10 protective services, 5 for senior citizens. What I was referring to today, this is the allocation policy for the aided self-help program, and this policy, this specific allocation policy is cabinet approved. Okay, it was last year, cabinet gave us special allocation policy for the aided self-help project. So it's two different policies, two different programs.
Yeah, but I am very consistent. I'm saying the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, which is an independent arm of government and the state, and we don't take orders or instructions from any cabinet. This Parliament approved this and sent it to your ministry. And your ministry must take cognizance of this recommendation. And you must inform the cabinet of the decision of the Parliament on this matter. That is the point I'm making to you, Madam Permanent Secretary. So please be guided accordingly. That's the first point I'd like to make to you. The second point I'd like to make to you, could you tell this committee how is the allocation and selection process going to be executed? And I think I recall you saying that no firm has been selected as yet. You are going to select a firm. Is that so? Yes. And when do you expect this process to commence, Madam Permanent Secretary?
The allocation process, presently the applications are being inputted into the system. The allocation process is expected, the evaluation and the allocation process is expected to start within the next month. And there's an allocation criteria which is being used, where the points are being allocated in different categories. And I'll give you examples. Dependents, there's a maximum of 3 points. There's the persons who are on the HGC database for certain periods of time, up to more than 8 years, a maximum of 5 points. There's points for disability. That's how it's being done. So it's a strict allocation process which is being used, and the applicants will be evaluated on that basis. Madam PS referred to the overseeing by an auditing firm. that firm will oversee the whole process and the evaluation.
When is that firm going to be selected or identified, and what process is expected to be followed by the ministry in this regard?
Yes. Okay, the process for selection of that firm has not yet started, but that will be done within a short period of time.
Could you tell us, for instance, where these lots are being, where are they located? Is it in the east, the west, the south? Where are these lots going to be allocated? Where are they located, rather?
Okay, I'll give you examples. Remember, I'll give you examples of where some of the lots are. Most of the lots are in central Trinidad. They're fully developed lots. We have Bucaro in central Trinidad. We have Balmain. We have Orangefield Road, Waterloo, Carsonfield, Milton Village. Those are some of the areas where lots are available. Factory Road, Chaguanas as well.
You have any idea where the other lots are going to be? Where are you projecting to have other lots developed fully at 120,000 fully loaded?
Okay, as mentioned before, the LSA is developing lands under its quarter regularization program, and while developing lands under its quarter regularization program, we get additional lots or available lots. Some of the lots that are becoming available would be in Guayaguari, La Savanne, Guayaguari, Nurse Trace, Guayaguari. There's some lots in Moruga. There's in Picton, San Fernando. Those are the areas that has been earmarked at this time. Pitimo, San Fernando as well, in St. Madeleine.
How have these areas been identified? What criteria have been used to identify these areas?
Okay, the lots that are available under the LSA's quarter regularization program from the development program that we have, where you have identified sites for development. And what we do when we're developing these lands, we try to take as much of the state land that is available. So you have squatters who may be existing on part of the lands, and we maximize the use of the available state land, and you get the additional lots.
All right. Would you be kind enough to provide this committee with a detailed breakdown of the information that you have provided and a projection as it relates to future allocation of lots throughout the Republic of Trinidad? Because I think Tobago will be doing their own thing because they have their own Tobago House of Assembly in that regard. I want to ask you about tenure of security. You said that these lots would be fully loaded, meaning infrastructurally, the water, lights, whatever. What would be, are you going to be issuing a lease to each tenant that is going to occupy these lands or lots when they to construct their properties ultimately? And if you're going to do that, are you going to use the law to accomplish that mission? And would that be a 99-year lease or 30-year lease?
Each beneficiary, each successful beneficiary, will get a 30-year lease. Those leases would be, at this time, those leases would be provided through the Office of the Commissioner of State Lands. The leases will be processed by the Chief Solicitor's Department.
Well, I'm very happy to hear this because I'm coming to another question. You are from the LSA. There are thousands and thousands of persons who have what is called letters of comfort in this country. This is highly discriminatory because they have been there for decades awaiting what is called their leases so that they can be able to go to the bank and get money borrowed so that they can construct proper homes. What efforts are being made by the LSA in order to regularize those citizens who have letters of comfort for decades and they need to get what is called leases so that they can have what is called tenure of security or security of tenure on their property that they have in possession or they are in possession of? Could you tell us what is the policy that you are pursuing on behalf of the government through the LSA to regularize those persons with legitimate letters of comfort?
Remember, you're right, and the quarter regularization program involves both infrastructure development and provision of tenure for persons who are so eligible. part of the tenure process is what we call certificates of comfort in accordance with the law. It's a three-stage process. A certificate of comfort is followed by what you call a statutory lease, and finally by a deed of lease for 199 years, and that's provided under the Act. The LSA has been developing sites over the years, and for the first time in the history of the LSA, we now have a pricing policy that has been approved for persons who are so qualified to move from one stage to the next. That pricing policy was approved in the year 2017. Further to that, the Cabinet has also agreed and approved the use of the statutory lease. A statutory lease format has been agreed upon, a statutory lease for 30 years, where persons who are so eligible will be given 30 years to pay for the price for the deed and then acquire that deed of lease for 199 years. Presently, we are processing persons who have certificates of comfort, and over the next few months, you will see that a number of persons will be moving to the statutory lease stage, and this is for the first time in the history of this country that will be happening. Persons moving from the certificate of comfort stage to the statutory lease stage. That has not happened before, but it's happening now. During 2018, we estimate that we will be given more than 1,000 statutory leases for persons who already possess certificates of comfort.
How many people in Trinidad and Tobago, have legitimate certificates of comfort?
There are approximately 8,000 persons who have received certificates of comfort from the Land Settlement Agency. That is out of a total application base of approximately 23,000 families of persons who have applied for certificates of comfort.
Could you further tell this committee what is the pricing policy for the statutory leases that the Cabinet has agreed to for persons and so on who are going to be securing, through what you have said, statutory leases?
The approved pricing policy for a deed to acquire a deed of lease for 199 years, it's 25% of the open market value of the fully developed plot of land.
The open, you want to explain to this committee and to the population, what does that translate into, this open market policy? And could you give us a concrete example
Certainly.
Of what that means?
Certainly. So I'll give you an example. For example, we have developed lands in Cashew Gardens, Carsonfield, fully developed lots with all the amenities. The open market value that has been assessed by the Commissioner of Valuations range around $200,000 for a plot of land. The individual, the beneficiary, will pay 25% of the open market value. That is $50,000 for a fully developed plot of land, and that's the approved policy. But that's just an example of one area. The open market value will fluctuate from area to area depending on where it's located.
And I'm very happy to hear that, and I hope that, for instance, the LSA would be able to share more and more information with the population on this matter. Can I ask you, Mr. Hussain, there has been talk going around, and I think it was in the newspapers recently, that the government, through the LSA, wants to dislocate hundreds of residents occupying a place in St. Joseph by the name of Bangladesh. Is that reality or is that fantasy?
The LSA has no such intention, and we have no intention to dislocate anybody.
So that's fake news?
Well, I don't know.
Well, no, I just want, I am just clearing the air on these matters.
Bangladesh is one of the squatting sites identified. Remember, Bangladesh
no,
is one of the...
that was in the newspapers, yeah? Okay. So I'm just saying that I'm happy that you are now putting on the record that the LSA has no such policy, nor the government of Trinidad and Tobago has directed the LSA to pursue any such policy. Is that a fact, sir?
Remember, we have no such direction. The Bangladesh is one of the squatting sites listed in the LSA Act. It's one of the 251 sites. In order to develop any squatting sites, the LSA seeks the approval of the regulatory agencies, being the EMA, WASA, Town and Country, etc. And any site will only be developed where we get those approvals.
And finally, could you give us an understanding of the current situation as it relates to the PPP that is currently on its way in the Mount Lambert, Mount Hope area involving NHIC and the HDC. I don't know if Mr. Brent Lyons could probably help us there. Where are we with that? And is there any other model similar along the lines throughout Trinidad that you are aware of?
Remember that specific PPP project you referred to is currently under negotiations with the contractor.
Any idea as to when we will consume or that will be consummated so that the project would be proceeded with?
We are hoping in the shortest order.
How long this matter has been outstanding, Mr. Brent Lyons?
A few months, member.
And do you anticipate before the end of this 2018 that would be addressed?
Certainly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Member Webster-Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. My question is to both Madam Pierce and Mr. Lyons. Going back to the report that Member Mark spoke to, it was laid in the Senate on the 24th of June 2014 and in the House of Representatives on the 25th of June 2014. Now, my question is, your time at the ministry and at HEC, have you found documentation anywhere to suggest that the recommendations in this document were implemented during 2014 and 2015?
Member, I wasn't aware of the document, so.
Similar.
So we have taken note of it, so we would check our
I want
records.
an undertaking. I want you to go back and look and report for me if the recommendations were implemented in 2014 and 2015. Thanks.
Report to the committee, yes. Member Ruffle.
I have a brief follow-up question to something Member Mark was asking. The CEO of the LSA, Mr. Hossain, had said that the cost to land development for persons receiving tenure of land would be $50,000. But earlier you had said that the cost to the agency would be about $120,000. So is the difference a subsidy by the state?
Well, remember, I gave one example of Cassenfield Shogunas for a lot of land. And based on the calculations and based on the example that I gave of $200,000, it works out, 25% worked out to be $50,000. Now, there are other sites that the LSA has developed that the Commission of Valuation has valued at much higher values, as much as $300,000 and $400,000. So 25% of the value in that case would be, let's take a lot of land that is valued at $400,000, would be $100,000. The LSA development cost, average development costs under this quarter reg program, it's between $100,000 to $125,000. The government has decided that the infrastructure costs will be waived and persons will best be paying the premium. So there is some level of subsidy. But if you look at the example that I've just given, where a plot of land could be sold as much as $100,000, it means that the subsidy will be much less than where the lands are valued less.
Okay. So the figure you referred to before, the 50,000, was 25% of the market rate of 200,000. That particular example.
That is.
So, you were saying, in answer to Senator Mark's question, Member Mark's question, you were saying that the 25% was written in law. I am not familiar with this.
No, remember, no, it's not written in law. It's a cabinet-approved policy.
Okay, and it's 25%, or is it 50,000?
It's 25% of the open market value.
Okay.
There were previous cabinet-approved policies which took it to a much higher amount with 30%. The present cabinet has approved 25%.
Okay. What year was that?
Previous approved policy?
No, the 25%.
25% is 2017.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Member Mark.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Hossain if he could put in writing for the consumption of this committee the entire pricing policy that you have outlined as it relates to the regularization of persons who have what they call legitimate certificates of comfort, as well as what you have outlined in terms of the issuing of lots. So if you could make that available. And Madam Permanent Secretary and Mr. Brent Lange, this is my final question. We could go on until about 8 o'clock, because I have several others, but I won't detain you that long. I would want to ask if it's possible, because remember, our responsibility is to see how we can help your organizations, both the HDC and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, meet the housing needs and improve the quality of life and the standard of living of the citizenry of our country. Would you want to share with this committee some of your recommendations that you would like this committee to consider to take to the Parliament to help the HDC and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development better carry out its responsibility, and particularly given the revised mandate that you have outlined, how can this committee assist both the HDC and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development in seeking to achieve your objectives in the future?
I would like to get back to the office, and we will convene and we will put that in writing. I think that is an excellent question, and I would want to seek the opinion and input from our managers at both the ministry and the HDC. So I thank you for that question.
And maybe you can probably, within what period of time would be good for you, for your ministry, to get back to us in writing?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 to 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. It's Carnival.
Yeah, but Carnival and so on shouldn't stop us from getting things done. So could we be a little more generous, or reasonable, I should say, and could we kind of compromise and say within 14 days?
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mark. Member Raful.
Thank you. A quick follow-up question, what I was asking before. So the difference in subsidy between the 25% of the open market value, the difference in values between the 25% of the open market value and the cost by the LSE to develop that land for tenure, that cost, that difference is absorbed by the state. That's a subsidy.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Officials, I want to thank you as we come to a close, but before we close, I know it's a very important, it's an issue that's very dear to the hearts of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So before I ask you, Madam PS, to make a closing statement, perhaps I could invite Mr. Lyons to make a closing statement in terms of any suggestions or remarks going forward.
Vice Chair, thank you very much. Let me take the opportunity, Vice Chair and members, to thank this committee for having us here to go through issues in the construction and maintenance program. I think we've been able to air quite a lot, and I hope we provided sufficient information and responses and so on. The responses we said we provide in writing, we will follow up with that. I would want to take the opportunity to always talk to my HDC communities to remind all residents and so on. One, of course, continue to pay rents and your mortgages on time. Two, be a good neighbor. If you're having challenges with neighbors and so on, we do have a social department where we can provide some conflict resolution issues and so on. So I invite them to do that. Three, take care of your community. It is yours. Be a neighbor's keeper. Be your eyes and ears on the ground. Those are the things I want to share.
Lyons. Madam PS.
I found this, Chair, Deputy Chair, members, I found this meeting to be very thought-provoking, very fruitful, and it is forcing us at the ministry and the agency to review our processes, review our activities, and the way we do business. We thank you for the questions that you have raised here, that you have, asked here today. As I said, it forces us to think as how we could better serve our customers, our clients. I just want to reiterate what Mr. Lyons here just said about, because even though it's one ministry and it's Ministry of Housing, HCC, where he said he wanted to tell the clients, pay your mortgage, be good neighbors, because actually I would have alluded to an education program that will be launched within the next 2 weeks, and the theme of it is AA Neighbor. So I want you to look out. I want members of the public who are listening to look out for it. Right? It's a first in the ministry where we actually have this sort of education program where using digital media. And then after that, we'll have spoken about the H101, that manual. Okay, so your recommendations here, your instructions, Member Mark, that I am to, that I am to find, and Member Webster, she's in here, to find the what report it was, the 2014, 20 what? The ninth report?
Let me read it. It's the ninth report of the Joint Select Committee.
The ninth report of the Joint Select Committee,
on ministries, statutory authorities. Right, it's the ninth report of the Joint Select Committee on ministries, statutory authorities. It is the fourth session, 2013/2014, 10th Parliament. It is on the administration and operations of the HDC. And it was laid June 24th in the Senate and June 25th, 2014 in the House of Representatives.
Okay, so
just to advise you, Madam PS, it is also available on the Parliament website.
All right. So we would, okay, so, all right, so we will be having a look at it. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. And I can assure you that when we go back to office, we will take into consideration your recommendations.
Thank you, Madam PS. And I would also want to re-emphasize the invitation by Member Mark from the entire committee that you give consideration to whatever recommendations you may want to forward to us and to inquire whether the period of 2 weeks is sufficient. Are you comfortable with that time frame? 14 days? Now we want to make sure the recommendations that you bring forward would be useful. So, yes? Okay. So I want to thank all the members, all the officials who have taken the time to be with us this afternoon, the officials from the HCC, Mr. Lyons, Mr. Quilkin, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Ramarak, Mr. Devenish, Mr. Campbell, and Mr. Barrow, and of course the officials from the ministry, your good self PS, Mr. Hussein, Ms. Antoine, Mr. Noel, and Ms. Brown. So I want to wish you all a very safe journey back to your homes and to say that you're now excused from this meeting. And this meeting is now suspended.